Good evening and welcome to OPC Season 2. I'm Kevin Everett Walker, joined with me tonight, Matt, Pixie, Carol, as we head into week 2 of the Season 2 festivities, we might as well say. And I'm glad to say, look, I think tonight is blank night because we're going to see the new roster.
Yeah, we get to see them back to back as well. It's a good way to put it, festivities. They're going to have an absolute party. This is going to be interesting, right? This is going to be the test of the new blank roster, and I think the key thing there is new. It's actually the first major change that squad has had for even dating long before OPC Season 1. So this is a bit of a shake-up for the team itself, and also quite a recent change. So it's going to be, this is a real kind of trial by fire in a way.
I think so as well. I think, for blank, they came second last season, if you want a little bit of a memory jog there. So they were only just shy of getting that first place. So for blank, they're hungry to get that first. Yeah. And so you could almost sort of consider maybe potential upgrades for this team as well. Certainly it's something that blank have sort of really been looking at. Now they've finally secured that, they've finally announced it. They said, we are going to do this. And their opponents to start things off are going to be Machi.
And I think this is a pretty fitting opponent as well. It sounds a little bit odd to say, but it's almost like you've got to climb the ladder of Taiwanese teams if you want to be able to re-challenge Flash Wolves in a final. I know that, no offense to Machi, mind you, they are a really strong team, but I think that's it stands as a really good challenge for this brand new roster.
And here we go, we're about to see blank. Here it is. Gumbo freshly shaved as one of the new members. Another one, Huwu and Hus, a couple of the returning members as well. Looking pretty fresh now, straight back into Taiwan after qualifying to BlizzCon in the Overwatch World Cup in Sydney. So that's something else the blank roster recently had. Yeah,
and by the way, that was the blank roster that didn't have Huwu and Hus in it. That was still with Kiki and Atar both. So Huwu has been basically a straight replacement for Kiki, Hus being a straight replacement for Atar in terms of roles.
All right, and we're going to have a few words from both sides as well. Cassius, the coach of Machi on the left, and a representative from blank, hopefully on their way up as well.
He's actually there right now. That's him. That's blank.
So blank's got 2 members, but we're still going to do well here. You haven't seen them yet. Do you feel any pressure or nervousness? Maybe slightly nervous, but I think we're still confident here. We shouldn't really have too much of an issue.
就是本季的成员呢有一些变动，那是不是有特殊的目标想要达成？
So have you got some new goals for the season?
Players for this, for our participation this season is a specific goal that we wish to accomplish.
Really just getting comfortable with these new players. It's the first tournament that we've had these 2 new players come onto our roster, so we're really looking forward to putting out a really solid performance. We've had a pretty intense boot camp over the last week, so just having fun as a team and really putting our best foot forward.
这是我们2位新的选手第一次在我们的队伍登上舞台，所以现在目标就是让继续磨合，然后让这2个新的选手可以融入我们的队伍。我们上一周有一周非常激烈的一个训练的一个过程，所以今天大家可以期待一个精彩的比赛。
那这次教练有没有对于这次的比赛第2季有没有什么新的期许
？Is there any hopes or expectations you have for new season of OPC?
Just being a shorter season, we're looking to get a lot more practice in this season overall, and by the end of it, having a lot of synergy between our players. So, we came second last season. We want to put a bit of a much stronger performance out this season.
就是希望我们现在新加2个选手之后，可以继续磨合，继续做好更好的配合。然后上一季我们只有达到第2名，所以这一季我们会有个更亮眼的成绩。
好，谢谢。那我们双方先握个手。
Thank you very much. So that's a blank and Machi. A bit of a pre-game talk there. Something interesting to sort of notice out of that is the key word there for me from blank side at least was boot camp, and that's quite important because this is a new roster that has been sort of put together in a recent amount of time. So I guess the one thing they're kind of lacking, and I kind of said the same thing about Mega Thunder in their opening match against Machi, is you are going up against Machi, who are veterans of the OPC. They've kept the exact same roster, same roles, same starting lineup, same staff. Blank, you got some changes now. Mega Thunder on their first day coming in. Unfortunately, not their hottest, but they did bounce back. Now for blank though, are they going to have the same problem where day 1, not going to have the best performance, still haven't meshed together as a team yet, come back stronger day 2, or blank going to come in day 1 extremely strong?
Yeah, and you do kind of hope, by the way, that it's the latter there, because the thing with them having these back-to-back games is if, especially these two newer players, who are very seasoned players in their own right, don't get me wrong, but they're also younger players, and the roster now doesn't have that same longevity as the previous 6. So if there are any day one jitters, this being essentially the biggest stage those guys will have played on under this entire roster, if you have a couple of issues today, you're going to have 2 matches dropped as opposed to just the 1. And your recovery, therefore, becomes just that little bit more difficult. And I mean, they said it themselves, it's a shorter season. They've got to do a lot more legwork. So you really don't want to have a hard performance on your first day, but you also don't want to let that thought get to you. If you're having a shaky day, just roll with the punches. Don't let it stress you out, because that's the sort of thing that can roll into the next day and the next day and the next day.
And it's an especially short season for Blank because, mind you, they've missed the first week of competition. So they're coming into week 2, and there's only 9 weeks of competition to start with. So this is an 8-week tournament for Blank now. If you're not too familiar with how the tournament structure works, there are 9 weeks of the tournament. 6 of those weeks will be double round robins, 3 weeks for each round robin into 3 weeks of playoffs. Let's take a look quickly at the standings, just to sort of catch you guys up on how we've sort of shaped up over week 1 already. Ardiant sitting pretty at 3-0. Mind you, that's also 9 map wins to 0 map losses. AHQ at 2-1, only having dropped, I believe, 1 match that was to Flash Wolves on Sunday of last week. Flash Wolves the 1-0 against AHQ. Machi sitting at 1-1. Hong Kong Attitude 1-2. Mega Thunder 1-2. And Blank Esports yet to pick up a first game. They haven't played yet, obviously, and Liberty Supreme, unfortunately, 0-3.
And there's some interesting things, just by the way, at play in those standings there, which were, you know, obvious if you took a good look through them. And that is actually last week, of the 8 teams, only half of them played 3 entire games. Ardiant being one of those, have those 3 wins. Liberland being one of those, has the 3 losses. And then in the mix there, you've got Hong Kong Attitude and AHQ, who are 1-2 and 2-1 respectively. So there are teams sitting in there, like Flash Wolves on the standings are currently 3rd place. That's because they've only had 1 match so far, and that was their win against AHQ. So a lot of those standings are still kind of being fleshed out. There's still a lot of questions about where these teams sit relative to one another. And one of the teams with the most questions about it is, of course, returning 2nd place team, Blank Esports.
All right, let's take a look at who Blank's opponents are and who everyone else is going to be playing as well for today. Machi versus Blank. So you'll sort of notice here, Machi on top. That means in the home position, Blank as the away team. Mega Thunder in the home position again. Blank as the away team. And we had one more match that we're going to tell you, and it's going to be...
It was HQ. Sorry, Hong Kong Attitude.
Yeah, so now we're going to take a look at the rosters in a little bit more detail as we sort of go over what this kind of means as well. So the home team will get a little bit of advantage that you'll hopefully be able to see later on. But Machi, let's look at this team in a little bit more detail first. These members we should be pretty familiar with. We do have a sub-member called Rai that so far we haven't seen in week number 1. Could be appearing here, but since Nuns is still on the roster for today, I'm going to say no. And for Machi, this is going to be an important game because they already beat Mega Thunder. They're sort of in the middle of the pack again, and this is a team that doesn't want to end in the middle of the pack again for Season 2.
Exactly, and that's what kind of hangs over them here. And the interesting thing, we talked quite a lot in week 1 about this, but Hong Kong Attitude had a really strong run towards the end of Season 1, and it was a run that really displaced Machi, who at that time were already in the middle of the pack. So, like, first of all, they've got to try and measure up to their Season 1 point. Second of all, they've got to start taking down the teams that were really bettering them towards the end of Season 1. And then they've really got to start pushing beyond that. And by the way, that there is D Crown, not quite DCR1. He spells it differently in game. Just to do that. DC Ron. So it's my favorite DC hero, actually.
But it's not Ron with R, it's with the W and the silent W. I want to talk about this player in particular because, you know, one thing about Machi is what are the strengths of this team so far? So one of them is the fact that they've been together for some time now. And also Kant has been absolutely amazing so far in the Tracer role. But it is these new members of Blank that are really important here.
So like I said, Huss is essentially a direct substitution in terms of role for ATAR. We'll be picking up that kind of DPS position. Still keeping the same lineup for the rest of the team though. So here we have RQT, one of their main healers, combining captain combining his forces with the man next to him, Gunba, and between the two as well, they often have they play almost a semi-analyst role in the team as well. That was something that really helped them out through Season 1 because one of the things with this team is they, especially when you compare them to teams like Flash Wolves and AHQ, had a lot less support staff. So a lot of that was coming internally. But now here, one of the other new players, Huwu, an absolute superstar and a very, very young player who some may remember from the New Zealand national team for World Cup. That's all I'll say about that. And of course, the rest of the team has remained the same through to the end. We have Trill. And of course, their last player. Drumroll, please.
I eat you up. Sorry, that might have been a little bit disappointing. But if you know Blank, if you know Blank, you know him anyway. So the important thing I want to sort of point out about Huwu is actually when we're talking about nationalities represented in this tournament, it is a very wide-reaching kind of tournament because with Huwu now coming from New Zealand, that is officially 9 countries represented, at least based on where players coming from.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big thing to consider for.
It actually is.
I guess a tournament like this, which is, each tournament has their own regionalization here, but a lot of countries represented in the OPC, so it's great to see now an addition of New Zealand.
Exactly. Indeed, we move further and further to having the actual representation of that Pacific part of Asia Pacific, which is quite significant. And that's the thing previously, I mean, as it is, Blank are the only Australian team, so having that extra representation there is quite an interesting thing. I think you make a good point there. But first map pick going to be coming up. Nothing too surprising, but I think this is brave territory for Machi to take Blank to in any case.
Comfortable territory.
Yeah, comfortable indeed for Machi, but I mean, we also know Blank's strength on this map. They are an incredibly strong control team as it is. So I wonder if this is Machi maybe just sounding them out in neutral territory to specifically poke at those newer players. That's the impression I get from that pick.
And just while we had that sort of moment there, you'll probably have noticed Machi got the home pick. So what that means is the home team, which is Machi for this match, they get to pick maps 1, 3, and 5. In this case, the control, which is going to be Lijiang, which Machi have already picked. They will also get the assault pick in the middle, which is map 3, and also the last map, which is the second hybrid of the series if we get to game number 5. And for Blank as the away team, they get map picks 2 and 4, which are going to be the first hybrid and then the escort should we reach a map 4 as well. And of course, the team that picks a map also gets to pick the starting side.
And, I mean, that doesn't really count for much on control. By the way, there is no starting side, but will, of course, become a factor later on. And I think there's another interesting thing at play. We'll see this later on in the series, but Assault has traditionally been Blank's weakest game mode, and Control has traditionally been their strongest. So, look, on Control match, you can just take them somewhere like Lijiang, take them to neutral territory. But Assault is somewhere they can really start moving the series towards Machi victory with a very well-placed map pick. So that's the power that Machi kind of have here, having this home side advantage against a team that is, second place from Season 1. This is actually a hefty challenge for them, as much as there are still a lot of unanswered questions about this Blank squad.
It actually it just so happens that being on the home side against Blank is pretty advantageous. Like you said, you get to pick their best game mode, and then you get to pick the map for their worst game mode as well. And I think that's something that weighs on the back of Blank in terms of they understand where their weaknesses in Season 1 were. They understand what they were good at, what they were not good at, and certainly with the new roster, certainly with the new pickups as well, that should have been taken into consideration. So I will be looking forward to seeing, do Blank still have a really strong control? Have they shored up those assault weaknesses yet?
And just by the way, if this is your first time tuning into OPC as of Season 2, of course, they are playing Control as a best of 3, not a best of 5 as it was in Season 1. So do keep that in mind moving forward as teams roll out.
Right, it's going to be the long gun, short gun lineup for Blank. And Nun's back onto the Doomfist. So we saw a pretty good Doomfist out of him in week number 1.
Wow, very
And he starts
quick.
off strong in week 2.
That's the good Doomfist we're talking about. And interesting no Doomfist
it's good.
out of Blank, but indeed, very good. Nuns may finally go down here to Trill. I mean, it's a revenge kill, but look, that's a wipe from Machi. That is an incredibly strong opening.
What an early gong as well. I mean, for Machi, this is, you don't usually see a lot of teams get wiped that heavily in the first initial fight. Now for Machi coming in, good early cap as well. Only lost, 2 members in the middle there. I think they managed to kill both RQT and Gummer, so the support line really important for Blank. That's where the leadership cast of Blank is as well. So you take them out early.
Wow, Huss
that's when they
sprayed onto Doomfist and instantly picks Restia as well. So they've seen what did work and what didn't, but Nuns takes him out just to kind of put insult to that. This is good target prioritization, though, out of Eat You Up. As the fight's kind of quietened down a little bit, now they're able to exert an advantage as they get right on top of the point. Pilot Diva down and out for the count, and Blank are going to get the regrab in a very quick fight, similarly quick to Machi's first one.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with that. And for Blank, you kind of have to consider, why didn't Huss just start with the Doomfist? I mean, this certainly is looking pretty good. I know it's something they have kind of practiced as well. Huss is one of those Swiss Army knife kind of players that does play a lot of different heroes, and he's good on quite a lot of different heroes as well. He played the main Tracer for his last team in Australia, and now picking up that more sort of flexible DPS spot, giving IU up that legendary tracer we know him of from Season 1.
And by the way, I would say Huwu fits into the same camp, but Pulse Bomb eaten up by Huwu's counterpart, No Talk. That's pretty significant opener. Huss in a bit of trouble, but he is going to be fine, looking to get the pick as the Transcendence is out from Gunba. But Huwu, D-Max, they do pick No Talk. That is significant, but they trade off for Huwu. Now with the healer down for Machi, they've got an opening, but there's plenty of staying power on the side of Machi as well. Sound Barrier is going to keep Blank in it for a little bit longer, but Huss in trouble. He needs to turn something into a kill here. With the Sound Barrier out for Machi, he goes down. They're struggling to keep this an even fight now, Blank. They've still got some good resources at their disposal, but they're not really getting picks. What they are getting is more time on the point, and now going to have to wheel around and try and force Machi off it properly.
The time is still really important here. The objectives are still really important as they do finally get those kills. Kiyomi's going to come in with the Transcendence here. It's not really going to save the members that have already gone down, though, so actually, they're still bleeding out of this.
Honestly, Blank kind of weathered the storm there. They used their defensive resources when Machi finally got theirs up. No one from Machi had really died. Blank had the staying power. Good pick from Huss, though, to bump the pilot Diva there, but it's not really enough to save the team as Nuns gets picked, and that was a lot of time and resources actually wasted by Machi in the end. Props to Blank for holding tight through that.
I think for Machi as well, they felt like they were actually ahead for a decent amount of that. I'd have to agree they were ahead, but it was when Kant went down, it was when Kiyomi did use the Transcendence, but unfortunately the power players weren't there to really take advantage of it. Blank definitely weathered that storm, kept the progress going, and now they're about to head into the 90+%.
That was a smart move by Huwu to kind of cut off the reinforcements from Machi so they could pick the front line. Nuns and D-Crown down as Gunba pops the Transcendence. Kant does get a good pick on RQT, but they're going to need so much more than that. And Kant is their only DPS in this fight right now. Huss is just running rampant. He's doing so much of the upfront damage so his team can get the pick-offs. There's the closing kills for that one. Overtime vanishes. Eat You Up takes a dive for style points, and Blank questions answered. 1-0 up.
I think Eat You Up's taking the shortcut down to Night Market. Night Market is below Garden.
He's going to drop straight onto the point.
He's getting there before the rest of his team because he's ready to go to the next map already.
It's a good plan,
1-0 up. 1-0 up, you're absolutely right about that. A little bit of an interesting start there with the fact that Blank did get wiped in, I would say, pretty clean fashion by Machi. It was a full team wipe, all 6 down. Machi only lost 2. Sniped out RQT and Gumber on the back line. Like I said, that's the leadership line of Blank. You take them out early, I think that's a big problem for Blank.
Yeah, the thing I just have to keep coming back to, though, is that very protracted fight. Blank basically used their resources, got a couple of picks, Machi got a couple of picks, then Machi got their ultimates up, used them, and got nothing out of them. That was actually the significant kind of turning point fight, because that was like 50-60% worth of the point. But now on Control Center, unfortunately, wasn't Night Market, so Eat You Up's going to be on the wrong map here. But this could be a different story, and Kant takes him out to begin with. Now they really need to open this one up quickly or back right off, and Huss, he can only go in on that Doomfist as Trill gets picked off. This is going to be a similarly spectacular wipe from Machi to get the point in their control at the top.
Very strong opening. So for Blank, so far, the trend is they don't do so well in these opening fights. That's at least what we're seeing here. Now, Kant did a great job of opening IU up, and this is the guy that I sort of highlighted as we went through the players very early on before we even started this match. And Kant has been one of the up-and-coming players, and I expect a lot from this guy.
I absolutely agree with you. It is hard to come up against Eat You Up, but Huss taking a fist to the face from Nuns. Good trade-off onto Restia. They need to get a bit more than that done, but Machi members are low. Nuns can stay in this fight for a while, so they're just going to back off for a moment as Blank advance. They're trying to close out the mech. Good target prioritization, yeah, with the Pulse Bomb, but they are still very lean on members with No Talk gone, and Nuns in a bit of trouble. Is going to be able to get out. Has to actually use the Meteor Strike defensively and is now going to look for a pick with it, but it's going to be tricky. Drops into the middle of the back line, and actually immediately has to back out. Transcendence pop from Kiyomi to give them staying power, and unfortunately Blank could not close off the kills before that one came up. Machi reinforced, and now Blank are losing a lot of time.
Well, it's kind of like the opposite of what we saw on Gardens, where it was Machi who was just kind of really fight into Blank territory. This time around, Blank trying to fight into Machi territory, and Machi really getting that progress up. The difference, at least with Blank, is they've saved a lot of ults, so now they can make that big play, they can make that big commit, and I'm expecting them to be able to win a fight.
There's a very early sound barrier out of Machi, and it's already disappeared now as RQT commits his own. Gunba is not very close to his Transcendence. They pick off Kiyomi though, and wow, yeah, here comes the out-and-out aggression. They survived really the only defensive tool Machi had, and now they're just going on the attack. They do lose Gunba in among this, but they're on the offensive. They're controlling the point as well. Should just be able to close out the last few kills off the back of this. No Talk losing the mech. There we go. That's what they needed to open up the last few members here as the Winston goes down. Machi, if they want to try and stay in this fight, push it over 90%, that's an option, but they would be giving a lot of ult charge, choose not to, and just back off.
So a pretty expensive fight all up for Blank. There was 5 ultimates spent from them. They had 5 to go, and they got absolutely 0. Now, Edo's about to get that pulse bomb again. Machi, 82% to 0. This is a big catch-up here now that Blank has to sort of get into, and not a lot to use. They just have to win a fight off of 1 pulse bomb. If they can do that, they'll be good. If they can't do that, they'll be in a really bad spot. I'm expecting Machi to actually win Control Center.
Yeah, it's certainly looking that way. In fact, they only really need one good fight and then to kind of last out. But Eat, you are forced to use the recoil. That's Nuns. It's time to hit the go button. It's a little bit low, so he has to be careful. Has to go in with his Winston. They trade off. That is a decent one for Machi, but they're a little bit lean in terms of DPS. So Kant needs to pull a lot of weight again as the remaining members get picked. Oh, great pick by Gunbear. Shuts the door on that fight, and Blank are going to hold on to the point for longer.
And that could have been big because Kant had the pulse bomb himself. If he stuck it onto Gumba, might have killed RQT as well. If not, would have chunked out RQT. Kant could have come in for the double kill on both the supports, and we would have seen a very different fight. So Blank do manage to hold on. Gumba did a lot of work there for Machi Esports. They are now losing that sort of lead that they had, under 30% from, I guess, the gap between the two teams. Machi, you know, they're in a sort of spot where actually Blank have the ultimate advantage now.
Yeah, going to go for a very deep dive onto Gunbear. They do force the Transcendence, but this actually just gives Blank room to play with all the ultimates they have at their disposal as Reshi goes down in the chaos. Hustlers loses life as well. No use of the ultimate, and Trill forced to pop the Primal Rage along with D-Crown just to keep both teams going at it for a little while longer. But it doesn't matter how this fight goes. This is going to be Blank catching up the percentage altogether. Now they're getting the picks to back it up as well. This could be disastrous for Machi as they're forced to back off.
And Machi really needs to get a second important kill after Nuns then managed to kill Huss. So Huss has been losing to Nuns on a lot of these 1v1, they're kind of like pseudo 1v1 Doomfist duels. But on the other hand, Machi aren't picking enough for kills on the other hand. I think Kant needs to be able to find the supports like he's been finding in other certain moments of the game so far.
And in truth, I feel like Nuns is hunting Huss more than he's hunting these backliners, and that is hurting them just a little bit. But there we go, going in deep to try and get onto them, and he picks up RQT and Gunba both with the help of Kant. That's the fight they needed, and it will just pull them back from the brink here as Blank were in the overtime. No talk self-destruct to secure it. That is the last ultimate they have aside from the pulse bomb though, so Blank have enough time for one final fight.
They're going to have to get together quickly for this one. We're about to head into the 90% mark for Machi as well. Very close control center so far, very competitive between both sides. But Blank coming in, no ultimates again. They've had this sort of moment before. They're going to have this one more time, and they really need to be able to take this one out. Gumba, very close to Transcendence, so something they might be able to use.
Ooh, Kant is looking for the catch. Yeah, absolutely good eat. Great timing on that gun, but Transcendence in the nick of time gets his team onto the point. Kiyomi does not have his just yet. They need to finish him off. Nuns very low, in trouble. D-Crown as well, and still no Transcendence available. Blank are keeping up the pressure, and No Talk is working overtime to keep the team topped off, but now the defensive ultimates come up. Restia in the nick of time along with Kiyomi as well. RQT now desperately needs that sound barrier. They lose D-Crown still though, Machi, so they're not looking too hot right now. Get the trade off on the supports, but Blank are not going to relent with the pressure, and it is looking sour now for Machi as the DPS is getting beaten further and further back, and now the closeout from Huss, miles behind the enemy lines, but making it pay off, and a stick to close it out is going to be Blank getting the regrab, 99-99, but they ultimately secure it 2-0.
And that, of course, means Blank take out Lijiang Tower, and that was a very hotly contested map, especially the control center. That could have still really gone either way. I'm going to highlight the play that Hu made at the end there. He managed to eat the pulse bomb from Kant, which could have made a very big difference. If Kant had managed to stick that, get the damage in there, that could have been a win for Machi instead. Not only that, but Gumba managed to get his Transcendence in time as well. So two of the factors that really got them over the line for Blank, which was stopping the win condition for Machi and then really activating their own win condition, and, you know, just well sort of played from Blank overall to get it over the line towards the end.
And I just want to say as well, I did mention it briefly when it happened, but look, who are getting that eat with the defense matrix? That's no accident, you know? Like, that's...
It's an accident if Kant just threw it in.
Yeah.
That would be an
oops. Yeah, but the thing is, look, Kant actually placed it well. Who had to be doing two things at once there. He needed to turn completely around to save his supports while also helping being frontline for the DPS that was charging, because it was 99-99. They had to hit the go button. So he really had the ideal time for that. They covered that brief moment while the defense matrix was not forward facing, and it completely paid off. That, honestly, to me, that says the boot camp so far has been successful. If that's the kind of play, the micro play that their new players can pull off in the heat of the moment, that bodes well.
Let's take a look at some replays now. Let's go straight back into Gardens. And this is going to be Blank after taking that second fight after losing the first one so heavily against Machi.
Yes, this was the very, very prolonged one, and you'll see what I talked about. Gunva had this Transcendence up very, very early here. RQT uses the sound barrier. Kiyomi went down, and this is key, right? Because Machi decided to stick with it through the sound barrier from Blank. They knew Restia had his own. He had to commit it to keep the team in, and they felt like they were fighting fairly evenly, which I do agree with, but this is where it now goes pear-shaped. After keeping even, they then don't get enough out of the resources they commit here. Blank, look at how healthy they all are. That's because both their healers have been in this the whole time. Even though they lacked Huss altogether for a good chunk of that, they weren't getting kills, but no one was being killed. Kiyomi finally comes in with the Transcendence, doesn't save Restia, doesn't save Kant, and the thing they were holding out for didn't pay off for them.
I think that's a really big moment as well, because Kiyomi originally died on 97%, so had he lived, that would have been the Transcendence a lot earlier, but the really key thing is not being able to save Kant in time, who was one of the big players now for Machi, is really pulling his own weight, but then also not saving Restia as well. Probably a bit of a mistake from both sides, I would say. Restia not really getting into where Kiyomi was, and Kiyomi not doing the same thing for his own teammate, and that really cost him in two kind of ways, which is missed execution to win the fight, but also committing a lot in terms of at least economy and ultimates, and then not winning the fight either. So that kind of makes it more difficult to win their next fight.
Exactly, and you do hit a point in fights like those where you have to make the decision as a team. Do we back off and go again, or do we feel now that the playing field is evened up that we can become that we can come out of this fight the better? And they made the call to stick with it and fight. It wasn't necessarily a bad call, but it didn't pay off. Arguably, they could have just fallen back and then come in with a slight advantage thanks to that Transcendence. Maybe that would have been a better call. But the trade-off would have been they would have lost the extra time of resetting for the fight. If they had have actually won that fight, they wouldn't have given up as much time, and they would have ended up off the back of it with a time lead because of the time they'd already had on the point. So you can completely understand why the call was made. And really, it just goes to show the caliber of team that Blank still is, that they were not taken out during that fight.
For Blank as well, it definitely so far shows there's a bit of synergy there, especially with the new members slotting in. But actually on the other side, I want to focus on Machi, and that was extremely competitive, at least from the Machi side. I know Machi have really stepped up this season. They're looking much better than last season. They're looking like a very strong contender for a top placement. We're actually going to go to another replay now into Control Center. And this is going to be Machi taking a big lead with Blank now coming in with that ultimate advantage. So this was Machi, again, winning that early fight that Blank weren't able to win. Huss getting the early kill into Kiyomi, and the ultimate advantage really sinks in here and really pulls a lot of weight for Blank, and it's something that Machi just sort of have to weather the storm, and they're not really able to. They get a couple of trades in there, getting the backline as usual. Gumba and Akitu have been targeted pretty hard by a lot of these members from the Machi side, but ultimately, Huss still being alive, I Eat You Up never really got shut down throughout the entire series at any point. If anyone was dying on the DPS side of Blank, it has been Huss, but never I Eat You Up.
And the thing that was interesting...
Except the Kant in 1v1s.
Yeah. The thing that was interesting about that fight is actually it was entirely dictated by Blank. That was where the pace of the fight was coming from. It didn't look that way for a very long time because Machi was successfully retreating back towards the point. But in order to cover that retreat, they had to use their defensive ultimates. Then Blank were able to use their own ones to kind of give themselves an advantageous position around the point that Machi had to fight on. And then when you suddenly saw like 4 kills come up in the kill feed, that's because suddenly Machi were out of resources. Blank had used theirs to get into position. They hit the go button and just collapsed straight in onto Machi. That's what happens in the end of that fight. And really it was a slight overextension by Machi that was unfortunately for them punished.
So I would also like to see how Blank handle other compositions now, because we did see the early Tracer Soldier that they tried to debut right at the top of Gardens, and that didn't quite work out for them. In fact, that was an extremely good fight for Machi. Then we came back with Huss's Doomfist. This seems to be a little bit more comfortable for Blank. This seems to be a little bit more practice, and mind you, with the limited amount of practice that they have had, this is probably what they have practiced a little bit more.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case. You're completely right. And I think a part of it as well is strictly just wanting to mirror what Machi are doing. I mean, if they've got a Doomfist diving your backliners, might as well run one of your own so that you can at least trade blow for blow. And that's something that Blank have always been confident that they're able to do.
Let's take a look at the overtime moment now in the control center. Right, sort of right towards the end here, and Machi do take this fight towards the end, and they are able to push it into their own sort of 99% here. And pretty good cleanup here from Machi. And what Blank actually did prior to this, which is quite important, is they spent 5 ultimates to actually get the point back.
Yeah.
And then they held on to it pretty cleanly. There was that moment where all they had was IEU-Up's Pulse Bomb, and they sort of won it off. I think Gumbo actually got that really great headshot onto Kant that really put Machi down. And then that was them unfortunately losing the next fight. Machi came back and put it to 99%. Blank then flipped it again, but a lot of flipping, a lot of both sides held the point for a very long time at different periods of the time. And that's what really says to me just how close the two teams are, which is why I got to say Machi have really stepped up.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. But I think the one defining difference did happen to be, you noted it there, there was that one fight Blank had where really they only had IEU-Up's Pulse Bomb, and they were able to live through that fight and catch up in terms of percentage. When Machi found themselves in the exact same situation on their own 99% overtime, they weren't able to hold out, and Blank did end up winning that fight. Right now, that is the difference between these two teams.
The other difference is Machi have had that really good lead on Control Center. The big difference, I think, for Machi so far, if we're going to use one map as any evidence, is a very small sample size at that, but it is what we're working with here, and that's how Machi are winning those opening fights. And Blank are not just losing them, but they're losing those opening fights quite heavily. So it's a kind of a big problem, especially for a game mode like Control. Now, we did sort of say, are Blank still good at Control? They were very dominant at Control last season. Definitely was their best game mode. They're coming into this looking good, and I think the evidence of Blank being good at Control is more towards the mid to late game. How do they sort of manage the sort of stage where, okay, we're behind by a large margin, 82%. How we're going to catch up here? What if we do if we're behind? And also, how do we secure this game and actually win it? But what is still concerning is what is happening in the very early stages.
Yeah.
And is that going to carry on to other game modes now? We're going into hybrid. King's Row is a pick by Blank, by the way. The opening fight, what's that going to look like? If you lose the opening fight as a defender on a map like this, you just lose the cap.
Exactly. King's Row being the pick as well, I think this is quite interesting. This is Blank's pick, and once upon a time, this was very much considered to be a Blank-favored map, as much as it is normally just neutral territory. But I don't know that that's quite the case anymore. This does start to feel more and more neutral every time these guys play on it, and it's not because they're getting worse. Honestly, all teams are just now pushing up the standard. The question I kind of have is when we now compare Blank on King's Row to a team like Ardiant on King's Row, do they still match up? This isn't the match where we're going to get that question answered, but we are at least going to get a taste of what this particular Blank lineup looks like on King's Row, and whether they can kind of push their standard a little bit higher and continue leading the pack on this map.
Well, the thing is, we have actually seen Machi on King's Row, and we saw that against AHQ on the second day of week 1. And what we did get out of that was Nuns on the Doomfist was exceptionally good. He was one of the key factors for Machi to really push their way through AHQ, and that was a very close map, a map that AHQ still ended up winning. I think AHQ's attack was just that much better than Machi's, but again, Machi made it very competitive, and that's got to be a little bit concerning for Blank, because AHQ come back with more of the same roster than they had last season compared to Blank, and Blank have shown some problems already in the early stages of their gameplay.
Out the gate, Machi going to be attacking first. That means Blank have opted to defend, and there they are with the long gun, short gun, by the way, Gunba as well, onto the Ana. Ooh, D-Crown nearly got picked off with that bio grenade on him. Still about 200 health, but I mean, when you've got the focus fire, it's kind of how it can go sometimes.
So look for the area control here from Machi. You see they're already packing themselves up on this right side high ground. They got to try and stop Huss from maintaining his high ground position, and this is where Nuns really excels. He's going to be able to find a nice wall rocket punch here on anybody, and that's going to really open up the fight against Blank Esports.
Tell you what, though, they are not giving it up easy. Blank actually hold on to that ground for a very long amount of time. Huss does not let himself get displaced, even between Kant and Nuns trying to aggress onto him and pick off on Kant as well. Did force Machi to retreat, so now let's see how Blank hold out the second one.
That's really IEU punching back onto Kant as well, who, Kant's really been stepping up to IEU's level, at least so far onto Lijiang, but I see yet another 1v1. I don't know, do these two really want to duel it out? I think both might just back off.
Yeah, they feel like they're, wow, eat you up with only 34 health left. One clips Kant. They do lose RQT though, so there is an opening for Machi that they need to leverage because RQT's respawn is a long way away. But the pick on Restia, oh, never mind. This is getting spicy now for Blank. They're in a bit of trouble here with the nano boost out on Trill. He's really going to have to do work here. Huwu does pick off No Talk's mech, but they need a lot more than that, and they are now lacking in DPS. Eat you up is really all they've got left, and they have to get a lot out of him. Machi have already reinforced first, and Blank aren't in a great position to just fully back off. They are now just barely able to do so and do want to re-aggress onto this point.
I'm looking forward to Blank being able to come back on now because they have the ultimates to sort of work with here. The one they are lacking is Gumba, but Trill's going to be the first one in there. Pulse Bomb already picks up a kill, but it's Nuns once more. He's the one opening up the fight for
that's
Blank,
a
and this
big
is rather
one.
for Machi. And this is what we saw with Machi against AHQ. It's Nuns again.
Yeah, what Blank have done is at least bled the clock down, but yeah, Nuns absolutely seals the deal on that fight the moment it begins. Good movement by Blank to retreat from a tricky spot and then be able to reset and re-aggress. But honestly, Machi are now looking very scary coming into the streets phase with Nuns leading the charge.
And I'm expecting Huss to really consider if he wants to stay onto the Soldier again, because you really got to go back to Lijiang a little bit. You really got to think about the moment when Huss started as Soldier, looked at Nuns' Doomfist and said, look, I don't know if I want to play into that. And now you're starting to see what it does look like when Huss plays into Nuns' Doomfist. And this guy's a hunter. Nuns is looking for Huss. Said earlier on, because he's going to try and displace Huss. Now he's doing better than that. He's not displacing him. He's actually getting the kills on him instead.
Oh, wow, yeah, nearly. He was just waiting for Eeyop to blink into that room. It's like he just knew. Like, isn't that what the Doomfist cinematic was? Like, he just predicts Tracer's blink.
Yeah.
But that's the self-destruct out from Huwu. Unfortunately, sorry, that's the one out of No Talk, and Huwu did not get back in the mech. That was a little bit rough out of him, and the momentum continues for Machi just off the back of that double.
I'm actually going to keep this one moving for sure. This is a big wipe now. I believe it was a full wipe, the Trill dying there. I can't even tell anymore. Machi are getting a lot of kills on this kill feed, more than I can sort of keep up with here, more than Blank can keep up with here. Still waiting to use that tag visor from Huss as well. We're holding on to a couple of ultimates here from Blank, but they need to set up a good position. But I don't know if they're actually going to get that because they've already been knocked off from the high ground. They're now going to try and re-aggress into the streets phase, and the cart's nearly pushed up.
And indeed, this is the last stand for Blank right now. The sound barrier kind of forced, and Huss still very aggressive on. Good pick on Kant, alleviates the pressure, gives him a bit of room to get that tactical visor out, and they catch Nuns in it. That's what they needed, and it flags the retreat for Machi. They do use their own Primal Rage in that as well, but they're going to preserve lives and actually preserve a ton of ult charge as well. So actually, Machi, despite losing their one, are not looking too bad still.
Not too bad at all. Machi Esports finally managed to get that tag visor out into the game as well. I think for Machi, might have dived it a little bit too deep there. Nuns was one of the culprits. He kind of went past the cap itself. He sort of went a little bit too far in, directly played into Huss's tag visor. We're going to see a little bit more tools coming up from Machi in this next push here, but Eat Up.
That's a good pulse bomb, and D-Crown getting picked. No Talk D-Mech. That's a great opening for the side of Blank. They do commit the Transcendence as well. It wasn't necessary, but since it's out, they're going to try and run down as much of Machi as possible. Picking off Nuns off the back end as well is really, really great for them. Weren't quite able to fully pet Diva No Talk, but they bought themselves a ton of time and won a very low economy fight.
And this is starting to look like, you know, where we were in, I guess, the Gardens of Lijiang, where Machi had this early lead. Blank sort of come in a little bit slower, but once they get set up, once they have this defensive position, they start to get really difficult to break past. And already we're seeing evidence of Blank able to win fights on very low economy, something that Machi, I don't know. I don't know if they can do that as well.
Yeah, wow, really going deep to try and pick off Nuns, but does not quite work out for them. So now Blank are going to have to find another way to get their start in this fight with the Transcendence out from Kiyomi and a lot of defensive tools still available for Machi. Blank don't really have anything to match this with. Yeah, Blank just have to give them space, but yeah, Machi aren't really getting much progress out of this actually. So good reaction by Blank, and now they can start to put on a bit of pressure. Going to be looking to leverage this tactical visor as soon as they've got it. So Huss must be kept alive now as the aggression comes out from Machi. No Talk in with the self-destruct, and the payload nearly over the line. Kiyomi for Eat You Up is a trade that Blank will take because they've got the tactical visor now, but they lose Huss. That is no longer an option. The payload looking to go over the line now as Huwu does get one with the self-destruct, and actually the pickoff on Kand as well means Blank can go aggressive Trill to close it out with his teammate Huwu there, and this new tank member is absolutely shining. In the nick of time, they are just barely able to repel Machi despite losing their key resources.
And they managed to charge up enough ults to hold on to this cap as well. I mean, for Machi Esports, really running out of time here. 35 seconds left on the clock. This is the worst possible card position for them with this kind of time remaining. They're going to have to absolutely die for the card to keep it alive. The overtime does not favor Machi whatsoever in this upcoming fight. And Blank, once again, they're able to hold on. The discipline really shows for them because Machi, they've really dived quite deep there. They didn't get a push onto the card. Trill kept it where it was. and that made all the difference.
And now Blank have a ton of resources. They didn't have a Sound Barrier in Transcendence. They weren't even close to that in the last fight. Machi had both, used both, and now look where it's got them. And this is going to be a really uphill battle for them. They weren't even able to win the even battle, so Machi going to have to dig deep for this one, trying to get the open up as can, but Eat You Up picks off Kiyomi. The Transcendence keeping Blank very healthy through this, gives Huss the space and the time. The team goes on the attack and just closes the door on Machi's fingertips there. Good distance out of the Taiwanese squad, but Blank hold firm on the defense.
It's definitely Blank getting into the groove here. A slow start team. I think that's been quite evident so far with the Blank roster. Slow start on Lijiang Tower, slow start on Kings River. Once they really get into the zone, once they really start filling in their shoes here, you get to the middle part of the game. This is where the Blank roster really shines on both the control map and now also on Kings Row as well. It's kind of evident of maybe the strengths and weaknesses of this team, maybe a playstyle thing as well. And for Huss, I think a little bit of difficulties with the soldier role early on. He didn't really find too many angles, didn't really find what he's looking for there. Nuns had a great showing, completely denying Huss on multiple occasions, taking him out of the fight, sending him back to the respawn room. But once it was really Blank getting towards the end stage of the streets. And by the way, they were in a really bad spot. They just lost a fight.
Yeah.
They were respawning. Cart was nearly pushed up, and they didn't have any positioning whatsoever. And they were able to scrape through a fight on the bare minimum. And that's really what's, to me, what has been making the difference for the two teams, is Blank able to win fights when maybe they shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly, and you're completely right there, because Machi's momentum through the earlier part of the streets phase was very, very solid, and you know, it's kind of what we expected out of them a little bit after seeing their recent performance. You know, Nuns with their Doomfist is really helping this team with those high momentum situations, really helps keep them rolling, where in the past they have faltered just a little bit, so that is an absolute positive. But the thing that really helped Blank as well is they did hold out for a good 2 minutes on the first point, then got that final contest. They lost it, but they burned a significant amount of clock, and that did mean they didn't have to hold as long as they otherwise would have. I mean, look, put one more fight into the mix off the back of the one that Blank won at the end there, and maybe Machi would have pushed it over the line. And that's the fight that didn't happen because of the time Blank held out for earlier.
We're actually going to see, if I'm not mistaken, you up on the Soldier this time, so I don't know, maybe not on the Tracer. I think Huss is probably going to go on the Doomfist here. And Soldier Doomfist I wouldn't be surprised about, because it is another composition we're starting to see a little bit more of. Losing IEU up on the Tracer does concern me a little bit, because he has now been more consistently winning those 1v1s against Cat, and also really pulling his weight across the board.
And this is really interesting. It gives them the same kind of diving pressure with just a little bit more of a stationary backline. Can be a strength, can be a weakness, but getting the catch on Kiyomi with the Helix Rockets would suggest strength so far, as Eat You Up now going to move up into the corridor. Wants to take the ground that Machi just have to completely see. They are trying to retreat so they can come back in and re-aggress, but with Eat You Up in this high ground, it's going to be very difficult. And yeah, nice kill indeed. No contest going to come in from Machi at the last minute here, and they just kind of have to cede the point altogether to Blank. That was a really clean cap.
Yeah, definitely far cleaner than Blank have shown on any of their sort of early stage fights, and I just have to say kind of improvement here, because that was a little bit of a worry. Punching Kant out as well. I mean, Kant can't even take a 1v1 with IEO because Huss is going to be in the way. This was what Nuns was doing to the Blank side on their attack, and now Blank are feeding them their own medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the pressure is incredible. And as much as he's not on the team, I am reminded a little bit of the old days of Atar when he'd play Genji and he'd just get like an ultimate in the streets phase, kill everyone, and suddenly the payload would be right before the second cap. That was way back in antiquity, but Huss certainly looking to create a similar situation, at least give them a good amount of space to move the payload for free.
And by the way, cap right before, with the cart right before the second cap is exactly where Blank need to get this to. Machi didn't cap out in the second. There's 5 minutes here now, just under 5 minutes for Machi to actually try and hold this one out.
Oh,
that's a
what a
long time.
wraparound.
Yep, absolutely finds himself another kill. So doing a great job of what Nuns was essentially doing last time around.
Oh, and Kiyomi too. That is devastating. Nuns finally responds, but he's caught in a bad spot because of it. Good pulse bomber to Eat You Up, but that's not going to do much to stop the Blank momentum here, as really it's just the D.Va, and the D.Va is dead. That was the pressure put on to Machi, given that they had to stop the cart before it gets past that second point. Like, they had to take a fight then, and Blank knew it, Huss read it, and he was ready for the backline.
So now we're going to see the period of the game where Machi actually do have ultimates. So they've sort of been operating quite low on economy. They're operating quite slim on their defenses. Unlike Blank, they're not winning the fights where they're really disadvantaged here. Now, Machi do have something to work with, but look at Blank, 6 ultimates to play in.
Wow.
I mean, if Blank are winning disadvantage, I'd say they're definitely winning advantage too.
There was a very early sound barrier, but honestly, this early attack buys out of Nuns could be the difference here because now EduUp is able to open his up. Huss going in with the Meteor Strike is able to just get a good enough shield off that he can keep the momentum going, and that is what they do now with Can off the table. Nuns getting pressured, he's in full retreat. May lose his life for it as well, and indeed he does. Good follow-up by Trill as Huss keeps everyone else away from the bulk of the team, gives space to the payload over the line in spectacular fashion, and if Lijiang Tower was close, King's Row was a blowout.
Unfortunately for Machi, that's definitely the case. Machi had a great showing on Lijiang Tower. Looked like anybody could have really taken that one. King's Row, some good early moments from Machi on their attack. Gotta still question a little bit about the early game, at least on the defensive side for Blank. But on attack, that was all Blank, and it really does remind me a little bit of the Machi versus AHQ series because, once again, it was the attack from the other team. In that case, it was AHQ's attack versus Machi that they did extremely well against Machi, and Machi really fell apart. So something on the Machi defense is definitely not working out for them, at least not on King's Row.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. And by comparison as well, we were saying off the back of Lijiang Tower, where Blank were losing those first fights especially, it wasn't as hard on Control Center as it had been on Gardens, but they did still lose both fairly resoundingly. That wasn't the case on King's Row. When they were first on the defense, they held out the first push, they did a decent job holding the second one, and then were able to retreat successfully from a difficult position and then contest the point a little bit more. And the whole thing did end up being a quote-unquote losing fight, but much different to what was happening to them on Lijiang Tower out of the gate. So I think the question there has been answered. No, Blank are not just going to lose the first fight of every single game. Yeah. The question is, in that case, what was going wrong on Lijiang Tower? That is something they'll need to take a look at.
I think, you know, if this is early stages of Blank and they are showing a little bit of weaknesses here,
it's kind of to be expected.
It is to be expected. The other side of that is silver lining is, you know, you're going to be able to use this experience to sort of shore up on those weaknesses too, because if this is what Blank looks like early on when the lineup is still kind of fresh, then you kind of expect better results even further on towards the later end of the tournament. Don't want to speak too soon about how Blank are doing because kind of, at least if we're going to go off of last season's events, or last season's placements rather, Blank's second place team versus Machi, the fifth place team. Machi looking much better than last season, but Blank is still that runner-up from OPC Season 1. So if anyone was favored in this matchup, despite Machi's improvement, still would have been Blank. So Machi, you got to think, they're still fighting an uphill battle, no matter how you sort of put this one together. The real test will be Blank when they face up against the likes of Flash Wolves, Arty, and stuff like that. That's when...
Even AHQ.
That's when the stuff like, if you're losing the early fights to Machi now, what's going to happen against the other teams?
Yeah, exactly. You know, you've got that window where you need to kind of address that sort of stuff. But I think the one thing that's a positive takeaway, first of all, in spite of that, Blank were still able to come back against the teams like Machi. For now, it's an excusable weakness, if you will, and that gives them the time to address it. It means they can address it and still pick up wins, rather than having losses and then having mistakes to fix, because at that point, you've got an uphill battle. So that's kind of, I would say that's a real silver lining out of this. The other thing as well is, it's clear this Blank squad isn't going to have major problems. And it's not like we were expecting them to have major problems, but when you bring in new players, especially when you haven't had a huge amount of time to scrim with them, it does raise those sorts of questions. And those are the questions I feel have been answered here. It is feeling a little bit like, on paper, the Huru Huss substitution has just been a straight, like, flat skill improvement from their previous lineup.
Well, let's see some evidence of that now as we're about to head in some replays. This is going to be on the Machi attack, and I think they kind of struggled on their initial attack on through, and it was Nuns getting those 2 kills, and one onto Huss, and it should be a second one if I'm not mistaken. If not, it was just a big mess anyway, because Kiyomi picked up 2 on the support lines. Gumbo specifically went down to him, and the rest is kind of just Machi holding their ground here. If I'm not mistaken as well, Blank do come in for a little bit of token hold here that was unsuccessful.
Yeah, it was, unfortunately. And a lot of why it was unsuccessful was because of Nuns, and actually it earned him the play of the game in the end, but he was really able to keep them on lockdown as they were trying to push for the point. One of the things that really helped Machi in that fight was that they had the closer respawn, to be honest with you, because actually Blank drew first blood in that fight, and then the first 4 kills were just even trades both ways. Both Lucios and Tracers were dead, but Machi reinforced quicker because of the spawn proximity. And in that time, we're also putting on the pressure and getting kills, make no mistake. It wasn't just numerical advantage, but then getting that numerical advantage in the later parts where Blank were trying to re-aggress, that was a real saving grace for them.
Yeah, I think so as well. And, you know, for Machi, they're able to sort of continue that momentum for quite some time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
This is something that Machi used quite well in some of the other games that we've seen so far as well. They're now one of those teams that, much like AHQ from the first season, also evidently in this season as well, they're able to sort of carry on that snowball momentum from a fight win and just keep that one going. I think that one of the few occasions where we didn't see that was actually on Gardens, where the next fight immediately Blank came in and won that off. But every other fight, we could have seen a lot of momentum pushing from Machi. Let's take a look at the second replay now, a little bit further on.
So speaking of momentum,
this is still Machi's push, and look, Blank have a bit of a tough time here. You kind of mistook that for who's self-destruct.
Because they both threw it out at the same time.
But only one of them got the kills.
And the thing that was interesting about that is because Hubu had thrown his out, he was vulnerable to the self-destruct and therefore died to it. And getting that double kill was actually really great because, look, even if he'd only killed one person and not killed Hubu with the self-destruct, Blank probably could have recovered. Hubu would have got back in the mech.
Yeah.
They would have been, you know, 5 versus 6, but in a bit of a position to get a pick off because of the space Hubu's ultimate had made. But because it was 2, one of whom was a now vulnerable tank that is not normally vulnerable, that was what really tipped it over the edge for Machi.
And then the other thing is, the turning point of the game for me was what happened immediately after that, because Machi looked great up until then.
Yeah.
They kept pushing the cannon through, it nearly reached the end of the second cap. Then they took a fight where they went a little bit deep. Trill held onto the cart positioning. He made sure that Machi went pushing. In fact, Machi made the mistake of not prioritizing the actual objective itself, so they never really made good distance. You might actually see it here in this following replay. And in fact, no, it's the other way around. So this is actually Blank's attack now, the moment right before they sort of cap in there.
So the thing that's interesting here is actually Machi used a lot of their resources very, very early. Kiyomi had already committed his nano boost onto D-Crown. They hadn't got much for it. They could have used a nano visor. Nuns had committed his ultimate, used it, you know, got to fire off a couple of shots and then had to go into retreat. And Restia popped his ultimate way earlier. Oh, sorry, he actually popped his after RQT, but even so, popped it before any of the aggressive ultimates had actually come out of Blank. So there was still the tank visor on Haas, and there was still the self-destruct and whatnot to come out. And that was what pushed it over the edge for Blank, is they were able to kind of bait out the fight a couple of times, and each time one member of Machi would fall for it, pop an ultimate. Whether or not they died was beside the point, because at the end of it, suddenly Blank had the positioning and the ultimates, and Machi were kind of on the back foot.
And the thing for Machi as well is that was the first fight where they really had some tools to work with. That's when their defensive ultimates really started to come online. You look on the other side, Blank came in with 6 ultimates. So this is a team now where we sort of talk about the fact that they can win in really poor situations when they are behind. They're also able to win quite leanly without using too many ultimates in a lot of the other fights. So they're able to get to the end of the map, in which case was, you know, where sort of Machi finished their attack. And Blank had so much to work with. It was almost inevitable for Blank to sort of cap on through. They still ended up spending 5 ultimates, so they have this sort of playstyle so far where you look at Lijiang, had a similar moment. You look at now this map on King's Row as well. They get to a sort of space where they have 5 or 6 ultimates. They spend about 5 of those, and then they get a really big win. So on one hand, good at saving them in other fights. On the other hand, maybe overspending on some of the bigger fights. But at least in that particular scenario, if you were going to overspend on any fight, you wanted to overspend on the fight where you're going to win and actually finish the map.
And the thing is, that was the first fight they had at that point as well. So in a way, you could afford to overspend because you have like 4 whole minutes of reset time where you can rebuild those resources. So absolutely.
So much time.
And it's one of those calls, like I talked about Machi making a similar kind of call in those high risk, high reward situations. They took the high risk of expending a lot of resources, and they actually got the high reward, which was winning the map right there and then.
All right, well, Blank are in the lead now, 2-0 so far. Lijiang was pretty close. King's Row not so much. Assault is going to be next. So far has been, I guess, the weakest game mode of Blank, and that's going to be tested by Machi very soon, all coming up right after this break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to OPC Season 2. We're about to head into map number 3 of the first match of the day. And that is, of course, between Blank and Machi. So far, Blank leading the tables 2-0, and it will be Machi's next map pick on the Assault.
I talked about this as well at the top of this match when you were talking about the home and away side. So, of course, with that home side there, Machi are going to get to pick Assault, and Assault has traditionally been Blank's weakest map mode. At the time, I said that is gives them a position to either close out the series, or if they have a lead, or give themselves an opportunity to turn it back around if they are behind. And unfortunately for Machi, it has fallen into that latter camp. So I'm now interested to see what map specifically they're going to take Blank to to try and put a map on the board for themselves, knowing full well they are then going to have to go and do Blank's own pick.
And it's going to be Temple of Anubis, and something we joked about last season, which is there's a specific club out there which is teams that have beaten Blank on Assault, and Machi's in that club. In fact, I think Machi were one of the, I guess, founding members even. They were probably one of the first teams. I think the first team was literally Flash Wolves, maybe. It was between Flash Wolves and AHU. They were definitely in there first. They're the forerunners of beating Blank on Assault. But Machi joined in slightly later date, but also one of the original members, so I mean, definitely something to remember out of that one, I guess.
That's actually completely
membership's still open for the summer season or winter, depending on which part of the world you live on.
Which team? There was also a team in there, and I'm trying.
Fireball got in.
It wasn't actually Blank, but there was a team that had a thing where like their win rate on the map was directly related to the temperature of the map. So like they were better on, I think it was the hotter ones and worse on the colder ones. So like in order, it was like Temple of Anubis, great. Hanamura, all right. Volskaya, no, dead, like absolutely terrible. And actually, interestingly, the reason I think it may have actually been Blank is because Volskaya has tended to be their strongest of the three. This was, of course, in Season 1, and now there is Horizon Lunar Colony in the mix. And I think a good boon for them as well is Horizon Lunar Colony is a map where we do see a lot of Doomfist, especially on that first point, being an extremely influential pick for both the attackers and defenders. Huss has already proved himself to be a very capable Doomfist. We're still in contention as to who is the best Doomfist in the tournament. We don't know just yet. We don't know just yet, but it could well be Erster. But certainly there's still the potential for it to be someone like Huss. So that is a boon that Blank now have on Assault, but there are still a lot of questions about this team on Assault, especially on Temple of Anubis. I think this is a very smart pick by Machi.
Yeah, and I'm struggling to remember which map exactly it was that Machi beat Blank on in terms of Assault, and it's probably...
I believe it was actually Temple of Anubis.
You might actually be right about that, but it's also a little bit irrelevant because it was so long ago. Different Blank lineup as well.
Very different patch. I mean,
very different patch.
Different patch.
Doomfist.
Doomfist wasn't a thing. Different kind of meta. Yeah, different Blank squad. Look, it's still semi-relevant, and I think the most relevant thing there actually is, first of all, Machi obviously feel they're good on Temple of Anubis. That goes without saying. And second of all, and this is a minor thing, but it can just give them that little bit of confidence boost. Like, okay, we have beat them on this map before. That was a long time ago, but we are still as confident on this map as we were. Have Blank stepped up. So that means Machi kind of go into this with a sort of advantage.
And it's interesting you say that because I feel like Machi have stepped up and they must feel they've stepped up. They had a great sort of performance on Lijiang. King's Row, still a lot of questions there. They lost that to AHQ as well. And the interesting there is I think they had a stronger showing in a closer series against AHQ than they just did against Blank. So maybe something to take away there. Don't want to read into that too much. The comparison's a little bit skewed. But, going to Temple of Anubis, the other interesting thing about this map is it's the first time we're seeing Temple of Anubis in the OPC on the new patch. What are teams specifically going to run here? Is Doomfist going to be one of those heroes? I'm going to say most likely, because specifically when you look at where Machi have been succeeding, nuns on the Doomfist have been one of the methods.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. But you're right, yeah, first we've seen of it. Teams have mostly been favoring Horizon Lunar Colony, and then we've seen a bit of Volskaya in the mix as well. And I think the thing that's interesting about Temple of Anubis is actually it was one of the Assault maps we saw the most innovation on in the later stretches of Season 1, especially with Sombra. We were seeing things like... yeah, like exactly. We were seeing like Mango Jai pulling out the attack Sombra and... hacking up the second point before capping the first one when the cap was all but guaranteed. And like all sorts of little things going on in there. So that's also still a factor that these teams will still actually have to have caught up on because that was only in like the last 2 or 3 weeks of Season 1.
The other thing is, this is the map that, and there it is, AU up on the Widowmaker. It classically is a Widowmaker start for a lot of teams, and a lot of teams includes Blank here, so they definitely do like to start with the Widowmaker on attack on their very first cap, and this sort of has been, to I guess, Blank's detriment as well as success. They've had sort of mixed results with this.
And interesting as well, we have Nuns back onto the Genji here, and ooh, that was very, very spicy for Kiyomi for a second. EU up. That's an interesting spot for the Venom trap, but in any case, protects him a little bit from Winston's. Huss has to kind of be the aggressive half of the DPS duo as the dive comes in from Nuns, does displace EU up, but they pop no talk smack. They'll be happy with that one. And actually, Nuns did be careful. Oh dear, very punished.
And that's the kind of thing here is for Nuns going in with the dash, if he doesn't get the kill, he's not going to get the reset. He's probably not going to live anymore either. So eat you up, really baited well there for Blank. And this is now a pretty decent lead in terms of players that Blank can work with.
Yeah, honestly, all Blank had to do from that point was just kind of cover their advance. And now they're well set up on this point. Eat you up is fairly untouchable right here, and he may still go down just because people can throw damage at him, but if that's happening, then Huss is going to be having free reign on the low ground. Nuns does finally come in and get the pick, looking for resets, but this is a very hard team to open up because of where they are set up, and that is a really good amount of aggression onto D-Crown. Nuns also picked off by Trill in among the chaos as Huss is just keeping Restia in trouble. Restia does get the pick there, but he's on the wrong side of that fight though, and is going to go down. They do drag out a little bit more time off the clock, but Blank are going to get this first point cap.
Yeah, who knew Lucio was the defender in Numbani that they really needed, not any of the OR14s or anything like that, or R15s, whatever model they were using.
It's going to be the next lore development after Doomfist steals
It's Lucio in a big
Yeah,
neck.
because Lucio's about to host a concert in Numbani, and like during the concert, he's actually going to stop Doomfist with the miracle of sound.
Well, Restia already did it once at least to Huss, and now Nuns is going to respond with Doomfist of their own, and this is what we expected, maybe even a little bit earlier on. I kind of wanted to see Nuns on the Doomfist. Maybe would have had
Oh, that's a good stick.
And Kant has had fantastic 6, at least in season.
Unfortunately, though, it was countered out by Gunbus Transcendence, and Huss picking his counterpart is good. Does get a hack, though. That's a really strong one. Huss totally immobilized by that. Good selection by Kiyomi. Does lose his life for it, but Blank, having not quite got a huge advantage in this early stage and now losing 2 DPS members, probably aren't going to get this opening third that they are desperately looking for, and may just want to back off before they lose much ultimate charge here, and indeed don't want to give much away either. Oh dear, D-Crown maybe a little bit too deep. Looks like he might just be able to get out now. Oh no.
Gotta call that one Deep Crown maybe, and Machi's gonna have to a little bit of a reset here. Don't want to lose too many members, but also Blank need to find an opening. So this is now the phase of the game again where we look back at King's Row. Blank saved up 6 ultimates. We're about to maybe get into another situation where Blank look to save 6 ultimates, or they'll just go a bit earlier with these 4 ultimates because you don't want to waste too much time either. They had a pretty good attack onto cap number 1, 5 minutes and 20, but we've seen teams fail with this amount of time before.
Indeed, we've seen Blank fail with this amount of time before, very specifically, and it was Machi on the defense where that has happened before. Huss looking for the picks, but not quite finding it as they go all out on this attack. No one dead just yet, but Blank are at least in the thick of it as the hack rather goes down. Nuns, though, double with the Meteor Strike onto the 2 supports. It's going to shut the door on that one, and that lack of mobility that came out of the EMP really sealed the deal on that one. So good job by Machi to keep the hold alive.
Still managed to pick up kills as well. Each up's actually going to go to Reaper now. Probably a good choice against the Kiyomi Sombra. That's been a bit of a problem as well. Probably gives a little bit of a more pressure added onto Nuns because you do risk getting one shot by Nuns on the Doomfist if you are playing something like Tracer. But now we're starting to see, you know, it's kind of going back into the position we've kind of seen from Blank before, which is if you don't have Eat Up on the Tracer, which is his best hero, it does bring up a few issues potentially. So Blank, a little bit of an all-in, I guess, here, and they got to have the 5 ults they've been waiting for. They got to go before Kiyomi gets the next EMP as well. Otherwise, a lot of this gets shut down.
Can's actually in a bit of a tight spot. He has to get back to his team and is going to do so while diving onto Huss, who is in a lot of trouble. But EU up draws first blood in the fight as Gunba gets the team on the point with the Transcendence. Now Machi is going to have to commit ultimates to keep themselves safe in this fight. They do create some good space with the self-destruct and pick Gunba. Now this is the pressure point for Blank. Will they crumble? Indeed,
crumbling.
Looks like that. Yeah, crumbling as EU up gets picked. And they're struggling to close out these kills here. Blank really having a hard time on this attack.
And that was a triple commit out of Blank as well. 3 ultimates used there, and they used a lot of them before the EMP came out. So the EMP was going to be pretty destructive if it was used before a good number of the ultimates. It was going to block out a lot of ultimates. But actually, Blank got a fairly decent fight in there because they were able to commit versus being completely blocked out by an EMP. And that's a question as well. Blank do still come in with ultimate advantage, but this is now the one game mode where Blank are not able to win these fights where they are behind.
Yeah, I think.
Or when they're ahead, to be quite honest.
Exactly, yeah. And that's exactly what we've seen them struggle with on Assault in the past. So a little bit of a, I mean, in a way, it's a return to form.
It's the Blank we know and love, fellas.
Yeah, Can getting picked off at the top, though, is a bit of a different one as Kiyomi gets in position. Good EMP, but needs to be able to get out, and he fails to do so. Blank may have just weathered the storm here as they pick Nuns as well. This is the one they were after, and they may just be able to get a third off the back of this one as Can's Pulse Bomb goes completely wide. No Talk drop down, and Restia too. Now, not only are they going to get a third, they're actually very well set up on the point. D-Crown has to leap over the point to try and reset, fails to do so, and now the members are trickling back onto the point. The Death Blossom to come through from EU up only gets the one because it was cancelled, but the one was enough because look at the members of Machi that are alive. It's just Kant and 2 tanks and a healer, and the healer is getting pressured, taken out now as Candace going to try and dive onto the point again. Huss is still here. They have the resources they need to just keep this one on lockdown while Machi are actually struggling to trickle back.
Machi need kills here because they're not getting anything. Finally, Nuns get something onto RTP, but actually Blank have a lot of ultimates to play with. They started with very little. They have about 5. They've already used 2.
Close
In fact,
out
they've
of
used
hand.
3, and they're going to get more kills here. Machi is struggling to get anything done. I think this is it.
This may just be. They only need to get a few more. They actually brawled through 2 whole thirds during that as the last member just gets slam dunked. That's a haymaker if I ever saw one. And Blank are going to secure it. It was very, very hard for them to push it through. But actually, once they were on the point and set up, they did look very, very solid. They were not possible to be dislodged.
I think that a lot of that really came down to Machi there. You got to question Kiyomi's engagement with the EMP. Not a bad EMP, but where was the follow-up there? And certainly Kiyomi losing his own life is a big question mark for that team. You have to look at a couple of the other sort of plays there. A missed pulse bomb by Kant, sort of knocked out by Huss as well. He had to rewind off a punch and then couldn't get anything done after that. It just felt like Machi feeding in members over and over and over. Nuns coming back at the end there. Huss already with the rocket punch charged up directly into the face. Look, there's only one fist fight I'm interested in tonight, and it's between Nuns and Huss.
Yeah, exactly. Never mind the boxing on Sunday. This is where it's at. Doomfist v Doomfist.
Yep.
But I think that was an interesting end because, in a way, for Blank, that's like a bit of a relief, I think, because they were looking like they were about to fall into an old pattern and just never quite push it through. They were able to do so. But they are very much not out of the woods because A, it took them a long time. They had a lot more opportunities to do it that failed before they got the successful one. And B, they now have to defend successfully, which is something they've equally had trouble with on the past in Temple of Anubis.
And I got to really add in as well, there was a couple of moments where Gumba got a couple of early picks in, which kind of gave it a bit more momentum. The first pick, you're like, okay, well, do they work off that? Is there something they can use? Then they pick up a second kill. It's like, well, now I think we really got to go in here. They finally do. EMP came out from Kiyomi. Didn't really get a lot done. So Blank made good use of, I would say, just good pickoffs and then turning that and converting to further kills, really pushing the momentum forward. And Machi just kind of falling apart after having a pretty great successful defense. But good penetration from Blank to be able to find where the openings of the Machi lineup was. What is interesting is they were winning when they were behind in that situation. They didn't get the ults until they were already held, or rather they were already set up on the cap.
Yeah, and you did mention it, but unfortunately Machi misfired on a couple of their own ultimates. But now on the defense here, and it's going to be mirrored matchups. Also, Huss's first appearance in the OPC on Genji. He is really wanting to show us what he's capable of tonight.
Huss has been a Genji player before. I think something that people forget about Huss is that he was on this roster at one point earlier this year when it was still Fusion Girls. Huss was on the team, so it's not really, I guess, the newest member. It's really kind of more like a homecoming, a welcoming for Huss.
Yeah, that's one good way to put it, but yeah, completely right. And you actually mentioned he's able to play the Tracer as well, so extremely flexible DPS they've got here. Trading Kiyomi for Gunba, they'll be happy with that as they pick off Restia as well. It's really just supports for supports, and now it's a pretty naked fight for both teams, but Huss in a lot of trouble, gets taken out by his counterpart, and that opens the door for Machi as Nuns runs down Wuchul to follow him to the grave, and Machi Esports very well set up on this first point, and what was actually a faster time than what Blank did.
Yeah, well, we got to still really address these opening fights, especially when we talk about the defense. We look at King's Row. This is where Blank struggled as well. On Blank's attack, they did great. On Blank's attack on Temple of Anubis as well, that first fight, they did great. But something about that first defense, that's been where Blank has been lacking.
Machi have a huge window here. Blank have swapped onto the Sombra here, and they've got like 6 whole minutes. Machi can easily fight for a third here as soon as they get this Dragon Blade up.
I think Machi can successfully play for thirds quite easy, especially like you just said, we're only just seeing the Sombra. That means you're not going to have health packs necessarily hacked just yet. You're not going to have a good charge, and certainly you're seeing us not even 20%.
Yeah,
Pulseman from IU doesn't really achieve anything either. So now it's Machi's turn to really make something happen.
Kant does go wide with his own, but now teams are essentially even, and Machi are about to get a ton of ults up on rotation. Nuns goes in with the sound barrier running on top of him, needs to close out a few. Good pick on Gunba, and there's the momentum as they close out the second healer, and Huss down and out to the count 2. Trill, Primal Rage to buy time along with Huwu self-destruct, but that's all they've really got. Who are they even buying time for as the first third is indeed capped over? Machi even decide they want more. They have the Transcendence to keep them safe, and now this is Blank maybe having to go for a full reset before they can get to the point. Gunba buys time with its own Transcendence, but again, this question is buy time for who, because Eat You Up is picked, and Huwu is only just getting back onto the point. Gunba is being pushed back in, and in one single push, Machi now 2/3, looking to get the last one. Blank finally getting a reset with the EMP as they get members on, picking off Kiyomi, and they are at last getting some payoff as they may be able to pick off Can here as well. Sound barrier to give them some legs, and my goodness, that came down to the wire for Blank, but that was only one push for Machi.
And it was one damn successful push as well, 2/3 like you mentioned. What was the saving grace there for Blank? EMP into RQT sound barrier, so ultimates were starting to come online for Blank. We talk about the momentum that Machi were using, the fact that they were so ahead. They had the ultimates to play with early. Sound barrier into Dragon Blade. That really gave Machi so much space to work with. Killing RQT and Gunba, again, these have always been the first two targets for Machi, and they successfully get them, but Machi unable to break through Blank, who still managed to hold on. It does look like, you know, some of the earlier maps we've seen from Blank, able to sort of get a win in there from very dire circumstances.
Yeah, now Blank, with any luck, will have weathered that first storm and can at least have the EMP up for most fights now. That would be ideal, but Machi are going to be coming in with a similar run of resources to that first fight, so it is definitely going to be a tricky situation for Blank.
We can't really see a repeat situation for Blank either, because they have another defense like that where they have to really scrape it through in the last minute. You're not going to get a last minute because you only have a third to work with.
Yeah, exactly. You can't afford to lose members and then go for a full reset, but there's going to be the open up from Nuns, so the Blank side retreats, but they lose Eat You Up and RQT. Good response with the Pulse Bomb, could just save them, but they're losing too many members, and Cadstone Pulse Bomb closing out on Huss. Even as the EMP had gone out, they did not have time for that full reset, and with a solid 2 minutes more than what Blank had, we're going into time back.
It's definitely a lot more convincing from Machi, and, you know, the question, and I guess the joke is, you know, is this Blank back to old form? And some of that is starting to come to light. In fact,
yes and no.
I would say old form Blank would be Blank not even finishing the map. So
yeah,
this is an improvement from season 1. Blank at least on Assault.
The yes is they're behind. The no is they at least capped out.
And so, it is sad to say that. It was like, whoa, look, Blank actually kept down.
Yeah,
something happened there. So they got a point on the board, but Time Bank is where it's all going to matter now. They have they're 2 minutes behind, like you said. Now, Blank has traditionally also been a team that has played quite well into Time Bank. They understand the objective of Time Bank quite well. But now it comes down to, are you going to be able to really, you know, close the gap between that 2 minutes? Because it is quite considerable.
Yeah, and you raise an interesting point there. I would say Blank, first and foremost, are one of the best teams at playing to the objective, sort of playing to the circumstance is probably a better term there when you're in those time bank situations. We do see it more often with them on Escort and Hybrid both, but we have seen it on Assault sometimes, and you're completely right. And I think actually it's something, even it's not necessarily that Blank are strong at it, it is just something a lot of teams are weak at. So naturally Blank get a bit of an advantage on that. And also they will be attacking first.
And that's the other thing, EU Up is not going to be on the Widow this time around. And we got to really consider that Blank had a pretty decent attack on their first attack on Temple of Anubis, so they can do that again. And they're going to have to really need to if they want to get any sort of distance going into Cap 2.
Not going to go quite so swimmingly this time as they lose Huss. And they've decided to keep on the pressure, looking to get a counter trade, but it's not working out so well just yet as Gunba aggressed upon. And now they may be a bit too deep to retreat. They do indeed lose Gunba. Huwu loses the mech as well. They have traded one with D-Crown. They have the closer respawn as well, but they've probably lost too many members for this to be considered too even a fight. Now the rest are just going to have to retreat anyway. They lose nearly a minute of their time.
And Blank do manage to get a few kills here, but they do bleed a little bit further. The more they stay in to try and get the counter trades, the more members they actually lose themselves. So it does sort of even itself out. Specifically when you look at Machi, they are building up ultimates. EMP already available. This is going to put a real damper on Blank's next push. They got to get a lot done in a similar situation we've seen before, only with IE UOP's Pulse Bomb.
Yeah, Kiyomi's going to look to come in from behind the team, so here comes the dive onto the high ground from Trill and Huss. They need to get something for it early. But actually, Kiyomi gets spotted out by Gunba, so decent positioning out of him, but Eat You Up, there's nothing with the Pulse Bomb. That is a force EMP. and it doesn't get much as RQT closes out the kill. Huss does go down in the trade, and Blank are looking worse, but whereas they lose the healers, and that's all Machi really wanted there as Nuns makes it work with the Dragon Blade. They do get a few return trades here, but aren't quite able to get a third, and again are just going to have to reset with very little time left on the clock now, Blank.
Barely any time, barely anything left to work with. Look, we've seen Blank pull something out of a magic bag before. They're going to need to pull a white rabbit out of this. Scumba's about to get that Transcendence. This is kind of where we see when Blank finished up the first time on Temple of Anubis, but they got a lot.
They gotta go. Someone's got to touch it. It's going to be eat you up, but he needs to not lose his life for it as well. That is crucial as the team now goes barreling onto the point. Sound barrier out first, as they did not have the Transcendence just yet. Now they commit that. They need to close out that kill on Nuns. There it goes. Good follow-up by Huss, as Huu catches one in the self-destruct. Does lose his own life to No Talks, but they are actually in the lead of this one. D-Crown will want to stall out, though, with his own Primal Rage here, even as they lose the supports, but he's not going to get a chance to pop it as he's caught up in a small room. And Huss putting the damage down, so you're right. They needed to pull a white rabbit out of the hat, and they did exactly that when it counted.
All right, well, now they're going to chop the man in half and put him back together. I don't know. What other magic tricks can you really come out of? That's a pretty difficult one.
Is this your card?
And I still don't know how that one works, so somebody please enlighten me. But Machi Esports, it's going to be Gumba going on the Reaper here. Look, they have even less time to work with than they had for the entirety of Capé, and that's, I guess, an obvious thing to say, but look, it's very dire. It's 14 seconds, a long distance to go.
Triple DPS. This is interesting. To me, it says they just want to get good damage. They know they're fighting into the EMP, but now they're not anymore, as they actually got that pick. 2 opening kills on DPS members, trying to get the closeout now on Nuns. They've still got the Pulse Bomb and Meteor Strike to commit. Meteor Strike out first, as they are really trying to close out Nuns. Eat you up, get sit. That's what they needed. He does lose his life for it, but it is indeed happening. The EMP does come out. They haven't quite got the full rack of kills here. May not quite get a third off this, actually, as they're starting to lose members, and now that single healer comes back to bite them. So they didn't quite get the kills they needed right off the top of it. Trill, last one on the point there, swinging his arms around for style points, and he is going to lose his life. Machi are losing members still, but they've got the respawn advantage, and it is paying dividends for them. Huss finally goes down, Trill to follow him, and Machi are going to hold on point 2 in time back.
I'm going to say that was a good attack from Blank, all things considered, because I'm not too sure they were expected to even get to Camp B in the first place. They barely made it past A, and they only got there in the last few seconds off of some pretty good plays by the members to get the early picks off. I think Kiyomi was kind of where it started falling apart from Machi, because he got caught out by Trill. Good position by Trill to be able to find that, force the EMP up. That's not the EMP you wanted. You could tell that was, I guess, a sort of last-ditch play by Kiyomi. He knew he was dead, so the only thing he could do was, well, I got to use this EMP. It's going to be the last fight on A. Not a very good EMP. Machi started losing more members. Like you said, got to close out the kill on Nuns. Huss did that as well, and it started to all fall into place for Blank. But once Machi started to get their foothold on B, after, I would say, still a pretty decent opening from Blank nonetheless, Machi end up holding on because of even trades. You can't be getting even trades against a defending team.
Yeah, and the reality is as well, it took Blank, what, 4 minutes more even to get it over the line on their initial attack on point B. We really weren't expecting them to do it on the first one, first attack rather, in Time Bank. And we saw what they picked there as well. They were picking the triple DPS as they were because they were just looking to get a third. They didn't have the staying power of the double supports, but they also didn't want to lose the ultimates they had on the DPSs. So they were only playing to maybe get a third. That's a loss that they were comfortable enough taking.
So this is now pretty scary for Blank because Machi got a decent amount of time to work with. In fact, it kind of just feels like a normal attack for Machi. This is about the normal amount of time you'd get anyway. Gumba's going to get a lot of work done here in the summer. We know he plays a lot of summer from Season 1, so looking forward to him being back on that role.
Yeah, and we'll have to see if Machi can deal with it. Oh, wow. I was going to say, can deal with it as Blank failed to deal with Machi's summer, but Huss, early pick onto Kant, that's the kind of opening you want. He just wants the full follow-up here. Successfully retreats as well when it gets a little bit too hairy, and Blank drawing first blood.
I think with Machi as well, they're happy to play with the time that they have here. Yeah. When you are into the time bank and you do understand or play to the circumstances, something we talk about a lot. The circumstance is Machi got to get this and then just get 1/3 of B, and they know they can get that, so they're not going to try and overextend here. They're just going to play for what they have.
And it means Blank have to constantly go on the attack as they do now. The EMP was out, but they lose Huss, lose Trill too. All they've got in return is No Talk's mech, and they actually just kind of dove into Machi, and Machi handled it like a champ. They're getting themselves onto the point now. Kiyomi, the only one to go down off the back end of that. Machi will be able to regroup quickly anyway with that closer spawn. So Blank do want to buy some time here and waste the clock that Machi have, but they don't want to give up ult.
I got to be a little bit concerned about Blank kind of feeding members in here because you have to be considerate of Machi's snowball potential. We saw that already on Machi's original push. They got 2/3 of their original push just based off momentum alone. This time, they only need 1/3, and they're so far ahead in ultimates already. They're about to get defensive ultimates as well. Pulse Bomb now online for Can. I mean, everything is just looking great for Machi. Blank Esports, they need another magic.
Ooh, that may just be it. The early Pulse Bomb and Kiyomi probably takes the wind out of the sails of this push. Oh, and closing out on Cat. They actually need to not go too deep and greedy on this one, but they're at least getting the rundown. So as it happens, Blanca kind of weathered the storm just through sheer aggression there, and I think the aggression maybe took Machi by surprise, but Machi still have all the resources they need to get a 3rd-in-1 fight.
And this is kind of how Blank won their attack originally as well in that cat beat, because they were able to find picks just seemingly, you know, out of thin air. They were able to pick a member out from Machi when maybe they shouldn't have, when maybe Machi just shouldn't have given it away. Blank actually are in a decent spot because that gave them the opportunity to get the ultimates back themselves, and with a few good ultimates, a few well executed ultimates that get a lot of value, Blank can actually hold on to this.
What they do have now crucially as well is that EMP. They're going to be fighting through a lot, but again, early pick onto Kiyomi. That is very unfortunate, but the guy's D-Crown goes down as well, and they just can't really fight through this EMP. That was a very deep dive from Huss there, but he does have the mobility to get back out. Looking to close out on no talk as late as possible to stagger the respawns and kill the clock.
So these super aggressive plays from Blank right now definitely putting Machi on the back foot. I don't know if Machi are look like they can actually deal with this properly. So far, evidently not. Machi are holding on to so many ultimates, and these ultimates don't count for anything if you can't actually get a fight. Machi don't necessarily want to be ulting outside of the cap itself, where Blank want to take the fights. If you're Machi, you want to be ulting on the cap where it actually counts, and you can get that 1/3. So for Machi, actually, you just got to get the past the front line of Blank and actually get on the cap itself first.
And this is their move to do so. They go for a full-on wraparound here, but Blank had the full rack of 6 ultimates to commit to it. Who picks Restia? And that could be all they need to just kind of flip it in their favor. Eat You Up commits the Pulse Bomb as well, and Blank are willing to throw everything they have at this fight. As it is, Machi already on the back foot, so now Blank can actually hold on to the rest of their ultimates anyway. And this is another really clean-looking fight from Blank. Suddenly, Machi find themselves in a spot where they can only afford one last fight.
Unfortunately, I got to say this, but that was probably the best fight so far for Machi, at least on the second cap. The big mistake I sort of caught out of that was Restia unfortunately died to the self-destruct. He didn't find a good position to hide, but nonetheless, if he knew he was going to die, maybe if he didn't even know he was going to die, I would have probably looked at committed the sound barrier there, because not using the ultimate and have Machi commit anyway without the sound barrier probably just gave Blank another tool to use in this final defense. And once you give Blank a little bit to use, they get this roll of ultimates going. Now they're rotating properly. And for Machi, it becomes a lot more difficult.
And again, Machi, same as Blank were on their attack. They know they're only playing for thirds. They go for the triple DPS. Only one healer, big EMP indeed, as they pay off with the pick on nuns. And already Machi, they're just looking to be falling to shambles in what is their last chance of getting on the point. It is just D-Crown and Can. And Can is being forced off, D-Crown is being run down, and the clock will run out. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to a golden point tiebreaker.
Oh, wow, Blank Esports, I mean, they really pulled one up. Final few resistances from Machi, but I think Machi had everything going for them, and it's just not really working out. No one can get on that cap. Golden point, like you said, we're going to go to a tiebreaker to find out who's actually going to take on Temple of Anubis.
This is...
But what a scare. It's a big scare for Blank.
This is how Blank turn a disadvantage into an advantage, though. It's like, you know what? We're not very good at Assault, but we're great at Control. Let's turn Assault into Control.
Yeah, play it like you play Control. Why not?
The thing that's interesting, Blank did actually get the 2-0 on Control, but the one thing Machi have going for them, since this is now relevant again, we'll go back to what happened on Lijiang Tower, is they were winning the opening fight. So if Machi can do that again, and this time just kind of clean up what was happening in the middle parts of those Control games, we could actually see them very much winning Golden Point here. So this is very much not out of the woods for Blank.
I really got to praise Blank's, I guess, adaptation there, because what they realized is the first time they were defending B, and where Machi really succeeded was their ability to snowball quite hard off the opening fight, get the 2/3, get a lot of ultimate advantage, sound barrier to Dragon Blade, big combo for Machi, got so much out of it. And for Blank this time around, they said, look, okay, we're really behind here. The only way we're going to defend this and not actually just lose outright, because it was a winning situation, 100% a winning situation for Machi, is Blank going, we're going to play this hyper aggressively, really catch Machi out, where they're not expecting us. They did exactly that, and then they did it again. And by the time you've done it twice, suddenly that big advantage that Machi's built up doesn't mean anything, because Blank, with the defender's advantage and a couple of ultimates in the bank, that suddenly evened things out a lot.
Yeah, that really is just how it ended up playing out, and it's interesting because we're seeing this common trend now with Blank where often they're winning fights where they're winning fights almost all the time when they're even in terms of resources with their opponents, and often they're actually winning fights when they're totally behind in resources just because they read that that's the situation and come up with a plan, which is something I think a lot of teams don't really do. A lot of teams just sort of go, well, we're going to have to try and pull out some of their ultimates and try and even up the score a little bit, and then just kind of go for the fight, whereas it feels like Blank very much go in with a plan. And in this case, the plan was, let's get really aggressive, take them by surprise, pick a couple of people, cover our retreat. We have the defenders, the respawn advantage, so we can get away with it if it goes sour. Let's do that. And it paid off. And I think that's just really smart decision making by this team.
If you're Machi right now, you got to feel a little bit disappointed because that game was in your bag. This map should have been your win. And it's not so much that Blank stole it away from Machi, it's more so that Machi just didn't take the advantage, or really didn't take the opportunity, grab it and take it. I think they were put in a situation where they were so favored to win, and then right when it counted, they couldn't actually get that win. If you're Machi, you really have to sort of kind of consider where your adaptation might have been, and where that should have been, for me at least, was notice that Blank are playing quite aggressively on this B defense. Notice that they're actually very far behind, at least economically, and actually bait them out, because you want Blank to overextend here. Blank overextend, suddenly you can get the counter trades, suddenly you can get the picks where Blank were trying to find theirs, to really flip the tables on them. And that's where Machi would have actually won, had they identified that.
And you noted something important there. They didn't want to use ultimates before the point itself, but surely in that first fight, especially, they probably could have afforded to just use one.
Well, they were so far ahead, right?
Exactly, and still get on the point and have enough that they could cap a third, especially if they were going in with a numbers advantage. Sure, the respawn would mitigate that pretty quickly for Blank, but you would still be on the point as Machi with that ultimate advantage. And that was what they were failing to get because of how Blank were playing. But Slate is wiped clean. We're on to Golden Point.
Yeah, Blank Slate, you might call it. And now for Golden Point as well. Something you got to consider is it's not best of 3, it's a best of 1. And the scary thing is, this was the closest series on Lijiang between both teams, 99 to 99.
This is
so it could still go either way.
We've got a Doomfist McCree combo coming out for Blank, and we've got a Genji Tracer combo out. So this is a very
I call this one
McFist. Yeah. McFist, oh jeez, that sounds awful. But this is two very different team combos to what either of these teams are running first time around on Lijiang.
I think so, and both teams trying something different here. You got to consider the opening fights again. So Blank taking this one a little bit slower, but already disadvantaged. And Blank, this is what we're talking about. Something on Lijiang, something on Control. They're not able to capitalize on the opening fights, and they're getting dismantled.
Yeah, at least not against Machi. They do get the one trade with Restia, but the rest all go down, and the only one who's able to take a dive was Huwoosh. That's also a lot of ult charge in the pocket of Machi, and suddenly Blank have an uphill battle.
And now we're talking about the Machi snowball again, because this is, again, where they get their huge
They
leads.
need to do it.
And they're going to be able to do this. And now this is not going to be a situation where Blank can just surprise them, because Machi are the defenders. Blank have to initiate here. So for Machi, sit tight. Let's see what Blank are going to do, then respond correctly.
Compared to the Doomfist, though, they do get a lot more snowball potential out of Nuns, who is indeed going to dive deep, finds Gunva already. And this is how you leverage that snowball. Trill and Huwu do trade back, but not before losing 3 of their own members. Blank want to try and keep in this one, though, as Huss cracks it wide open with those 2 kills there. Well, one's the mech, the other's a kill, but they can turn that D-meching into a kill pretty quick, smart, and suddenly it is just D-Crown keeping the point on lockdown with the Primal Rage and Kant trying to zip around. They do get good trade backs, and this is almost going to be a full reset out of both sides now, but Machi, as they try and reinforce, find themselves up against Huss's fists and a sound barrier, and once again, from behind, Blank pull out the fight win.
You can tell Machi are really looking to try and extend the time as much as they can there. I've got to highlight Huss's play because he knocked out D-Crown. D-Crown tried to jump in for the cap. Huss immediately punched him back. Then D-Crown ulted and Huss killed him in the Primal Rage. So for Machi, this could have been 70% for them. This could have been 75%, but it's only 57, and that's a lot more manageable for Blank on the catch-up.
And this was where we were seeing Blank turn these games right around, indeed, on the initial Lijiang fight, but Kant going down early is again good news for them. Now Gunba does get picked, but they've got plenty of time and plenty of staying power. The Transcendence is forced defensively, as is the Sound Barrier. They're not actually fighting on the point, by the way, but what they are doing is drawing in Blank, and now Huss is going to have to pull out a miracle play here. It's going to be a very hard ask. He and Eat You Up both, as Huwu forced to use the self-destruct so that he can at least remake, but he does not successfully do so. No talk, good pressure applied, and now Blank are just sort of playing for time here, unless they can truly reinforce. But somehow Huss has been managing to pick up these tags, and now Kant goes down as Trill rejoins the fray. And Blank, despite losing 3 members at the top of that fight and losing those defensive resources, are able to turn it back around and are still holding on to the point.
And they've actually overtaken Machi's progress here as well. So for Machi, this should be now the counterattack because they are ahead of ultimates. Blank used a lot to keep hold of that count point itself. Now for Machi, what is actually going to be the opening play here? Because we're already seeing the Transcendence.
That's what it is.
And that's an opening.
Yeah, that's all they really need. And now Nuns cracks it wide open with that knife. You know, you kind of leverage it in the door or something. But Trill does pop
Big
one
knife.
with the Primal Rage, but that was also a key stall tool that they do not have at their disposal anymore. D-Crown uses his as well, happy to do so. They still have to address Huss though, because he's really pulling a lot of extra kills out of the hat here that are keeping them in the fight for much longer and allowing them to push it for much more percentage. And that is indeed going to push them all the way up to 98, 99 if Machi aren't careful. Indeed, the full 99, and Blank are happy to take the loss on the chin now.
They might not even have to. They can sort of keep things going here. I think for Blank, they just want to take this 157 if they can. Absolutely the plan, because all members are alive now. Big contest from Machi because Sound Barrier has to use. RQT should respond.
He needs to, otherwise he's going to die, but he's just riding the line here, doesn't commit it, and Trill may lose his life for it too, but Eat You Up trades back onto No Talk Smack. Kant goes down as this pulse bomb goes wide. They are trading blow for blow again, but Blank are now suffering for the lack of Lucio, and they're losing too many members. Gunba gets one sneaky pick at the end, but Machi got the grab through. And actually Blank, by not committing resources, only gave Machi ultimate charge.
Oh, Machi are going to have to do a lot with that ultimate charge too. I guess for Blank as well, that they hold on to the Sound Barrier for the next fight. You do have to question, could they have just won off the Sound Barrier? I want to lean towards yes, they probably would have won off that, but now they've got at least something to use going into this, and they can't squander this, and you don't want to be a Blank behind against a Machi Esports. So far, Blank has been managing to win, but when does that luck run out? When do you run out of magic tricks?
Certainly it's going to look like we got another 99 to 99 on control center of Lijiang Tower, and it is all golden point as well. Machi now just pushing up towards that point as both Transcendences are already used, and Gunba goes down off the back end of his D-Crown, pops the Primal Rage to keep himself alive, but does successfully do so. Huss finds a good pick and Eat You Up trades back, and now suddenly the fight is back even. Nuns can swing it though with this Dragon Blade. Needs to get a lot of work done as both the Winstons have run out of Primal Rage.
Both
Nuns gets both DPSs. That's exactly what he needed. And now Machi take the lead in the fight as they close off on Trill as well. Gunba forced the swap onto a DPS just to give them some extra legs in the fight. They do trade one back, but Machi still had the numerical advantage. Blank are desperately reinforcing, but it is really on the back foot. They need kills.
And Blank is so far ahead now. I think for Blank, they played a very risky game and they may just be paying for it now. Huss and Eat Up both getting taken out by Nuns. Only Trill, Huss and Eat Up now alive. It's 3 against 6, and I don't see them getting back in this.
That's all it is. Huss and Trill do get 2 for their trouble, actually a third, but none of them on the point as Trill gets picked and Huss goes down as well. The overtime had gone on so long, it vanished in the blink of an eye. I'll give them credit where credit is due. Blank kept that alive for much longer than they had any right to, but Machi kept it on lockdown. That's what really counts. And with that win on Control Center, Machi win Assault.
Here it is. This is the important kill. A string of kills here.
Yeah.
Both DPSs. Call him Nun Spray and Wipe because 99% of DPSs gets wiped out by this guy. And Machi, they win when it counts. Similar to where Blank had it on the actual Temple of Anubis, sort of multiple points there. They won it where it counted. And Machi, so far ahead there, it almost feels kind of justifying for Machi to take the series out, and well, the series being Temple, then going to the Golden Cap. And I think, you know, it was hardly fought. Hardly fought meaning, you know, it was fought hard.
It was
I guess.
hard fought.
It was hard fought. Hardly fought means something exactly in the opposite direction. But let's actually take a look at the replay now on Temple of Anubis. Man, this was a long map, I guess.
Yeah, it really was. It's so long, we went all the way to China. So this was the fight where Blank did actually start to get their advantage. Now you'll notice here, they have like a minute more than what they ended with. It took them a whole minute to win this fight. Now, What they had was the staying power from these two healers, and it really paid off. Even in losing Huss, they kept the numbers advantage and didn't lose anyone else. Finally, they start committing ultimates. And this was key as well. They had only just got picked. They hadn't committed ultimates for it. So now on the point, they had those ultimates to deal with Machi as they came back on the point after respawning. And it's the situation that you end up in so rarely on Assault, because it requires, I don't want to say a bit of luck, but you do have to get those good opening picks, and often the enemy has to just misposition ever so slightly. You know, it's kind of a unicorn situation really, and it did happen for Blank, and they did leverage it. That's what really counts here, so props them for doing so. But it was still a tenuous thing, right? This was, up until this point, a map where they were very much going to be held out for the entire clock.
This is exactly like you're saying, a situation for Blank where they're not favored to win a fight. Somehow they find an opening, somehow they poke a hole through, and it's why it kind of feels like them just pulling out magic tricks from somewhere, because they're getting these wins when almost they shouldn't be, and they get a win, they get a cap finish there, and then on the other side into Time Bank, again on the defense, they just get a win seemingly out of nowhere in a position when a lot of teams would not have been able to, and certainly Blank shouldn't have been able to, but they do that. Credit where credit is due, though. They're able to find those moments, they're able to get in there, because the setup was that Gumba and a couple of the other members were able to get the early picks, a couple of misfires on the ults. Let's take a look at another replay now, a little bit further in. This is going to be on Machi's attack, if I'm not mistaken. They had a lot more time to work with them. This is going to be the sound barrier into Dragon Blade. Double kill here from Nuns. Like I said, Nuns spraying one. This guy gets a lot of kills with the Dragon Blade, specifically on this combo, and 2/3 is what they get out of this engagement, and that's a lot. In fact, I expected that potentially Machi were going to get a full cap out of this, but it was off the back of, I think it was a Sombra EMP from Huss into a sound barrier from RQT, and Gumba kept it alive with the Transcendence here, and that's what kind of pushed Blank over the line to be able to hold on. That's the Transcendence.
And they stalled a lot here, and there were a couple of points where I did say stalling for what? It turned out they were stalling for Gunba's Transcendence, which was all they needed to kind of save it for a moment here. And now you'll notice Machi are on the point, but Blank are able to get a full respawn here now. And with that EMP, we're able to contest. And it was that extra bit of time bought by Gunba, who also didn't die after his Transcendence, to be noted. And now that they start going even with Machi in terms of picks, Machi do just have to retreat. But they did so after capping 2/3. They were very happy to take that. And Blank spent a lot of time and a lot of resources just holding on. Again, credit where credit's due. A lot of teams would have failed to do so and not held on for as long or as effectively, but they were on the back foot the entire time. And your ability to keep your balance on your back foot isn't necessarily a good thing. You'd rather just not be on the back foot at all.
I definitely have to agree with that. But you know, where Blank are able to get it back in there. Let's actually take a look at the next replay in the set now. This is going to be a little bit further on as well. I think this is the Time Bank push. This is when Gumba actually went on to the Reaper after only barely capping out A. And I think at this sort of point is when, I don't want to use the word luck, but when the luck kind of does feel like it runs out for Blank a little bit, because they only barely made it past A to start with, and the EMP really seals it for Kiyomi. He had a couple of misfires on the EMP throughout the series, but he did also have a couple of good ones that really helped push Machi over the line. And ultimately, you know, some good kills still, and even in a really bad losing position, you actually see Blank getting kills, specifically on Huss. He got so much done there, despite being so far behind.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing, though, that you do have to kind of note about that is, look, it's really impressive when, like, most of your team is dead and there's, like, 2 of you left and you still kill 2 people before you go down. But the other thing that does do is it does lose you quite a little bit more time if you really go balls to the wall and scrap it out as long as possible. Use all your mobility, use all your cooldowns, and you buy so much time. It's like, you know, when the Lucio is just rotating around the top of the point on like Lijiang Tower Gardens or something. Look, it looks cool and it's kind of useful, but actually you kind of burn your own clock if you haven't already got a successful cap by that point. And that is the other side of the coin there for Huss right now.
Absolutely. Let's look at the next replay now. This is kind of Blank, they're doing the repeat of what we saw in Lijiang already, which is consistently losing those early fights right at the start there. So we didn't quite catch the very opening of this replay, but the result is basically what I'm talking about there. And I do want to speak up on the point that you mentioned as well. I think in this specific situation, Hus and the rest of the team knew they only had like 30 seconds to push anyway, so that was the time, if any, to just get as many kills and just to really try things out. But at the same time, I do also agree, you probably do want to reset a little bit quicker if you know you're not going to get further in. That being said, also though, getting the kills does help charge your ultimate. So you got to balance the economic the economic advancement for your own team as well as the respawn time. So if you have the time to play with, that's when you want to play towards the more economic side. If you don't have the time to play with, that's when you probably want to respawn a bit quicker.
Yeah, and I would say for the most part, Blank are pulling it off. They're making the right call in that, but there's that 5% of the time where they're unfortunately not. I feel the point of comparison actually is Flash Wolves do a very similar thing. They really keep fights alive for very long and have a very good read on their own ability to turn a fight back around. And I would say the difference between Blank and what we had previously seen in Flash Wolves, this is only conjectural, mind you. We haven't actually seen them come up head to head, but I would say Blank are doing it right 95% of the time. Flash Wolves are doing it right 99% of the time. And that's, you know, potentially a positive thing, honestly, for Blank in terms of the closeness, but you do want to push it that little bit extra because that 5% is the 5% that punishes you against the teams like Flash Wolves, and they do want to push beyond their Season 1 result.
Exactly, and Flash Wolves were the gate guardians or the gatekeepers of that first place, the coveted first place for Blank, so I think the goal for Blank is definitely to win this season, and a new team that you definitely, you know, I think we mentioned right at the top of the broadcast, by the way, the next map pick by Blank is Dorado. We mentioned at the top of the broadcast, which is if there was ever going to be a time for excuses from Blank, like team's too new, not enough time to sort of gel in together, this is the week, because next week it's Ardeon and Flash Wolves. No space for mistakes anymore. No space for any more excuses. If you're not going to get it by then, suddenly you're going to be very far down that leaderboard. And you do not want to be that far down the leaderboard when you have a shorter season, when there's only 6 weeks to play with in the regular season, only 2 round robins, and you're going to be finishing middle of the pack in the first round robin. That's not where you want to be as Blank.
Exactly. The one thing that is in their favor right now, though, is there was, of course, the question of if they're going to have a rough day 1, will it be so rough that they end up down 0-2 at the end of it? Well, look, they did lose Assault there, but it was actually quite close. And indeed close when it got onto Golden Point as well, despite all the differences in time and percentage, Blank compared to Machi at various points throughout that. And now on Dorado, this is a great map for Blank. This is their pick. They are 2-1 up in the series. They only need to win this one, and they will have set themselves up such that they are not going to have that devastating 0-2 start to this tournament. They would ideally like to make it a 2-0. It isn't a sure thing just yet, but they're certainly not looking in bad shape for their first performance with this new lineup.
So the concerning thing to really note for Blank here is 2 things. First and foremost, we talk about Assault a little bit longer here as we are getting to Escort, but just finishing off the talk about Assault, are we convinced yet that Blank are better on Assault? Maybe better, but they're not capable of winning Assault just yet because that was a draw. The second concerning thing was they just lost the golden cap. That was on Lijiang. That was on Control. So what that says to me is that A, Blank are still not that confident or that ready to win Assault, and B, they're actually capable of losing Control, and that's scary.
And I think the other thing it says, to sort of add a C to that, is how much Machi have actually stepped up, not just from Season 1 to Season 2, but actually just within the series as well. They did actually identify what was going wrong on Control to turn it back around. So this is now a very scary team. We talk a lot about how much closer the talent pool and indeed the skill difference between a lot of these teams is in this season. I think that that's direct evidence of it at in that exact moment we just saw. But like you said, that is in the past. We are now on Dorado.
So if we talk, you know, so if Assault has a bad win rate for Blank, Escort has actually a pretty good win rate for Blank.
Dorado has an undefeated win rate for Blank.
The funny thing for Blank is, you know, they play a decent amount of Escort in the OPC just because they lose the Assault and they actually go on.
That's a good point. They get a lot of practice at it.
So, you know, it's a little bit concerning because Machi, they almost didn't renew their membership to the Beating Blank on Assault Club. They get that membership again, and now they want to get a new membership into the Beating Blank on Escort as well.
Yeah, they sort of renewed the membership at the last minute online. They kind of missed the window to do it by snail mail. But this is going to be Machi out the gate with a pharmacy combo, so Blank smartly give that some space. Now they're going to have the slightly harder task of pushing into the courtyard.
Actually, both teams are running the Mercy here, so that's kind of interesting, I guess, for Blank as well. Really valuing the res, the defensive res power on that first catch. So You know, I want to point out, you know, Blank still maybe have a little bit of struggles to open up with. Maybe this res does help them out a lot.
Yeah, but Huss getting aggressed upon. No talk, good follow-up on that one and having the safety from his healers. And with no res ready just yet from RQT, that is a death that Blank have to take on the chin. They haven't got a trade kill either, so they just have to give space and unfortunately lose EU up on the retreat as now Nuns gets free reign over the skies, and it might just be that Blank sort of have to cede this first point. Indeed, that is how it's going to play out.
And certainly you can't actually aggress Nuns without EU up, so killing EU up, especially at the time that they did kill it with a card this close, is a big factor. Eats up is going to start running back to point only now.
That is a big pick though to catch Kant there, Gunba pulling the weight. Eat You Up finding Kiyomi as well means there's suddenly no res available. They commit the ultimates. Oh, they crucially catch RQT in the rocket barrage. Had that not happened, that just would have been an easy res for Blank, and they would have been able to keep the fight going, maybe secure the point, but instead, Machi cap it. Huss is in the wrong position, goes down, and Machi are going to be able to get momentum on their side.
Yeah, Nuns really saved the day there for Machi Esports, and not the first time he's done it today. He's been the real big savior for this team. I talked a lot about Kant really pulling his weight into week 1. Now coming to week 2, it looks like Nuns is that guy instead, and the Nuns Kant combo together is now going to start to look very devastating. EU Up's expecting a Pharaoh. He's not going to get one because Nuns is switched now.
Yeah. And what that means is Huss suddenly has to go hunt a killer, but he's going right into Kiyomi. In doing so, Shrill does get a good pick on Kant, so Machi do have to respect that, give him some space.
It's a forced
he wants to go deep,
well.
yeah. Pops the Primal Rage, and there is a forced Meteor Strike out of Huss. So Machi committing the res can start just turning this one back around, unless Blank commit more resources, which they do. And now they really need to make something happen for it, Blank.
And Machi didn't get too much out of the res. I guess 1 is not too bad, so already playing the new Mercy, it seems. So Machi Esports, I think they need a bit more tempo here. Like, this is kind of stuff we're talking about. This is a good way to get that Gumba going down quite early in the fight.
Trade, though.
Does get traded like you said.
Yeah, Huss, though, in trouble as D-Crown goes deep for it, makes it work. Kant needs to keep himself alive, and Eat You Up does get a couple of crucial ones through with the Tac Visor. Machi have got a bit of distance, but they're not really fighting with a payload here, and no one's really moving the payload for this last little bit, so they didn't get as much as they could have, and now Blank are actually able to play for the payload themselves as they start to reinforce. Machi will get a bit of room on it, but Blank are going to get another great position fight.
And this is exactly what Blank was so great on Kings, where it was stopping up that card, making sure that even if they were losing, they're making sure that Machi are not getting progress, because progress is actually what wins you this game. So for Machi, you got to make sure you focus on this card and not let it just slip by you.
And there it goes again, Who out with the self-destruct just to create that space behind the card for Blank to start fighting on the objective. Meaning Machi don't get the extra distance. Now what they need though is to actually convert into kills, and losing Shrill is not a good way to start that off. Meteor Strike is going to have to get something here. They go for Nuns, and it does pay off as they trade for D-Crown as well. Drops down, gets Kiyomi with it, and Kant getting picked off as well. Huss will finally lose his life, but No Talk's the only one left, and indeed Blank have found a successful defense.
And this is about where they found the successful defense on Kings Row as well, so kind of a memory joggle now for Machi Esports. You don't want to be losing the same spot you lost on Kings Row. This is not where you want to be having the biggest problems for your team. Certainly Blank do struggle in the early stages of these escort and hybrid maps like we've seen already, but now we're getting to this freeze phase. This is where Blank start to get a little bit impenetrable. This is where their defense gets really, really good.
And they're really making use of the vertical space and the movement they're getting out of Huss and Shrill especially. Watch now as the wraparound comes from Machi looking to take the opposing high ground to eat you up. This is going to be the plan for the push and see if it pays off.
So if I got area control here, as long as they can keep up this top side, they can challenge it. Your Nuns is in a pretty good position. In fact, they don't even need to challenge it. They get Gumber instead.
That is a very good pick. The only problem is they're on the opposite side of the payload. So now with this nano boost onto Nuns, which is just about to run out, actually, they're going to need to get onto the payload itself. Picking Eat You Up did do good work for them. That's the one they've really been looking for. And now Huss as well means they can start playing for the payload. My goodness. Shrill gets picked as well. And Machi are going to open this one up. Who we're buying some time with the self-destruct, but all it really is time. They may get one extra fight because of the respawns coming in here, but Machi are on the cusp of capping.
And certainly expecting the extra fight, because Huru's not giving this one up just as soon as coming in. This is where Blank were able to hold on so many of the maps so fast.
But Eat You Up is already dead. That is a very important catch for Machi as they commit their own self-destruct so that Blank are kind of walking right into a death trap if they aren't careful. They're going to commit what they can now. Nuns with the tactical visor needs to get something, but it's D-Crown getting the kills, gets a third. How about? Why not? Who are going to get demeched as well, and Shul going to go down. They do run the clock out as much as possible. They forced Machi to use ultimates to secure it as well, so Blank do get something out of this, but it will be a cap for Machi. They are not going to be stopped up before that second point.
Yeah, and it's definitely an improvement for Machi, especially if we compare it to King's Row. Now Machi are going to push on through, get an attempt onto the third cap. The concerning thing is nearly got into the overtime there, so for Blank, it's almost held it exactly where they held on King's Row. And Machi still got to look, is this getting any easier for Machi? I'm going to say no, because the third cap is even more favorable for the defense.
Yeah, and now with D-Crown going down, I would have to agree with you as Kiyomi and Restia both. Huss is just unrelenting here. Surely even popping a mech for good measure means No Talk has to take a dive. And this is exactly what we expect out of a third point.
This is about the time in the map where I was going to say I'm expecting a change-up for Nuns, but the change-up I was expecting was onto a Doomfist and not onto the Genji here. He's had some pretty good runs on the Genji, but a lot of those have been off the back of Dragon Blades. Now, when you look at Nuns on the Doomfist, when you look at Huss on the Doomfist, you don't need the ultimate there. You're just getting kills with the regular abilities.
And they don't have a whole heap of time to charge up that Dragon Blade either. Just over 1:20 here for Machi. Nuns will at least get one, but oh dear, with Reshi getting picked, these fights are going to be really short if this is how it's going to keep happening. And that means Machi are going to fast run out of space to leverage an ultimate out of the Genji.
Starting to look like Temple of Anubis once more. You know, they cap B of Temple of Anubis, the final cap, and now the final cap of Dorado as well. Blank get very aggressive here, and suddenly Machi, just like Temple of Anubis, are not really finding an answer how to deal with this over-aggression coming up from Blank. Like I said previously though, maybe baiting out Blank is exactly what they need. Blank so far ahead in ultimates, they look like they can definitely hold.
Yeah, one thing that they haven't baited out exactly is actually those ultimates from Blank. So Machi, they really, like you said, need to make them overextend and maybe even commit ultimates that kind of go nowhere. Machi have to very much leverage what they have themselves, and they're looking for that Anubis on a D-Crowd. There it goes as he tries to find the healers, but he goes straight into a sound barrier, is now forced to pop his Primal Rage just to stay alive. He does have plenty of health, but the trade on Can as Eat You Up catches him, and now Gunba committing the Transcendence means actually those two resources out of Machi found nothing. Blank, they are out of resources themselves, but they have the defender's advantage here. With only 10 seconds on the clock, Machi need to start really closing out kills quick, smart, and with Nuns getting pressured, if they can't get that Dragon Blade, it's just not going to happen for them.
Oh no!
Goes. That's the disaster for Machi. They're going to get a bit more payload movement, but from here on out, it is all closure for Blank as Huwu picks off one. He's going to lose his mech surely at any second here. No, does not. And Machi can't quite get those last few through. Will not stall out long enough for Nuns to rejoin the fight, I don't think, unless No Talk.
He's here. Miracle. He's going to be here, but I don't think he's going to be here.
Is he going to be able to touch the card? He isn't. He going to get in, goes in with a deflect. Here's the Dragon Blade. He gets Gunbird. That's something, but he needs a lot more. And Huss just slams him into the ground. Much like the cinematic again, and there we go. Blank finding a nice point to hold Machi, but Machi did get a good amount of progress on the card.
Yeah, all Huss needed to do there was rip a door off of the card and just throw that at Nuns for good measure as well, right before you smack him in the face into, I guess, another card to disable him. But pretty crucial kills right at the end there, and you got to commend Huss one more time for that, because it was Nuns going down. In fact, I think it was Huwu that ended up killing Nuns, but either way, he went down just as the Dragon Blade came up. Kent went down just as the Pulse Bomb came up, and actually, Machi were in a sort of position where it was possible for them to push on through, because we talk about the potential overcommit, the bait out that Machi were looking for, where yeah, Blank's ahead in ultimates. They have like 5, 6 ultimates, but actually they spend all 5 and 6 all in one go, and evidently from that, they didn't get a full team wipe. They didn't really get a lot of mileage of what you'd expect out of 5 to 6 ult. So Machi, the turnaround was available. They just lost crucial members at crucial times.
And the interesting thing I do have to note about that is the turnaround was available, but also we have been talking a lot about how Blank seem to be very good at winning those fights where neither team has a ton of resources or even where they're a little bit behind. So
they showed that through the kills
exactly.
on Nuns and Kent.
That's the thing.
That's how they did it.
It's a bit of a bad thing that often they're using a lot of resources and maybe not getting great payoff for it, but it's a good thing that they can still win in those situations. And what they do often at least do is get advantageous positioning out of those ultimates. So that is something.
It's like when I was on Hollywood Boulevard and I paid way too much money. I tipped way too much money to guys just in suits and stuff like that, and I just didn't get the payout I was looking for. So
didn't get the payout,
for Blank as well.
Like an Elvis impersonator just comes up to you, like jumps into a selfie, and then he's like, "Pay up."
Hey up.
Thank you very much.
Here's 6 ultimates. What do I get? Not a lot.
Where's my cut?
But also, just like Blanca managed to get away and win at the end of the day, so it doesn't really matter.
This is an interesting triple tank setup because they got the 2 DPS coming out, so 1 healer, and it's going to be Gunba taking up the second, or rather third tank. Swaps off very quickly onto Zenyatta as Husk does unfortunately go down.
So strong defense so far from Machi. Okay, well that's a headshot. So this is kind of what we were expecting out of IE for the first time on Temple of Anubis. He was kind of slow to really find that pressure. This time around, the early kill Nuns will give a lot of distance, but Machi not giving this up too early. And actually, the cart doesn't have so much push so far.
I actually have a feeling Gunba and Eat You Up both hit a headshot at the same time, but there we go. It's Gunba doing the real work. This is who the carry on the team is. Husk does close out a no talk, and that's going to open up the courtyard for them, especially if they can get another headshot from Eat You Up.
And they need a lot of momentum here because catching up to the time that was set by Machi is really important. Machi had, so far, I would say, a much cleaner first cap through. Nuns on the Pharaoh was a big part of that one. Rocket Barrage cleaning up RQT. And this time around, EUP's looking for a similar amount of momentum, but 2 headshots probably needs a couple more.
What they have at least done with this Widowmaker is zoned Machi, but that now this is the re-address from Machi. They need to get something out of it as Kiyomi has committed this Nano Boost onto D-Crown, but he doesn't have a Primal Rage to give himself the longevity. But they do have this Transcendence as it gets popped out now, and Husk gets picked. That's the one they needed. That's how they start to push it in their favor, but Huwu takes out D-Crown and suddenly Blank had the momentum again. Eat You Up closes out with a great headshot on Kant, and No Talk D-Maxed as well before the self-destruct can come up. Nuns smartly holds onto the tactical visor, and really it ends up being a lot of the same. Both teams get the single contest on the first point defense, but ultimately the attackers will cap.
And Machi is still bleeding members here, and the bleed here, these 2 members that just died, No Talk and Restia, they're going to respawn from Camp C, so this is now a much more difficult setup for defense for Machi as they have to wait for those 2 additional members. Blank is still pushing on through. E-Up's got good positioning forward, does get pushed off, but the cart is moving, and Machi still waiting for members to get into position.
Husk looking to just kind of meander his way through that high ground. What they're going to do is play the cart here and now force Machi to commit, which is what Machi had to do, and they commit straight into a Transcendence. Chill goes behind the back line as, this is really spicy. Eat You Up with the positioning, catches Kiyomi as Husk closes out on Kant. Nuns does have the tag visor running, but he's got nowhere good to stand, and he's got no good targets either. Husk with the Meteor Strike doesn't even have any targets to land on, unfortunately, and the rest of the members of Machi are going to die on the wrong side of this cart as it gets underway.
Up's definitely on fire now. This guy's still managing to get picks, and this should be in the stage in the game where Up doesn't want to play Widow anymore. This is about the stage of the game where Nuns or Kant has put enough pressure on the guy that you force him to swap back onto Tracer. Maybe he's onto the Soldier again, whatever it is, but he should not be playing the Widowmaker, but he is still making it work. And that actually says more about Machi than it does about Blank so far.
I think you're completely right there. I mean, the sightlines aren't ideal, but he's still just putting on the pressure, especially onto the likes of Kiyomi here. And no one's really putting much pressure onto him. While he's got all this free reign, Husk is also able to...
nice juice.
This is just the classic rope-a-dope there as D-Crown goes down for it, and No Talk D-Mex is going to lose his life here. If he doesn't get back into the mech in time, he actually does. That is good news, but the Nano Boost on Kant was not an ideal target, and he's not getting anything done with it as Eat Up closes out Nuns as well. Why not? Can he get Kiyomi too? No, it is Trill that gets that kill credit, but in any case, the momentum is still on their side as they close in on the second point, with no such resistance coming out from Machi as what Blank did on their defense.
And Blank has so much time to work with. This is like the opposite of Temple of Anubis. 4 minutes and 18 seconds of what they started on here. Machi only managed to get this cap in into overtime, and they didn't get much distance at all with that either. So for Blank Esports, hey, it's working, so keep doing what you're doing. Machi still aren't finding any answers here. Nuns is still onto the Genji. I really liked Doomfist. I thought he did quite good on Doomfist, but we're not seeing any Doomfist on this map at all from him.
Yeah, they obviously have a strategy that they feel works better with this Genji, but I completely agree with you. We were seeing good things out of the Doomfist. It's obviously been a conscious choice. Yeah, Eat Up, another headshot just for good measure. Can't even low at that point, by the way. And No Talk on the cusp of being demected as it's got the full retreat. Gunba with the Transcendence. Look at how far forward they're playing. Machi cannot get any good positioning as Husk comes in, slam dunks D-Crown. Eat You Up will finally die to Kant, but it may not matter. Nuns looking to crack it open with the Dragon Blade. Crack open a Cold Boy as it were. Kant does get a double for his trouble. And they may just hold out barely, but look, it's under 5 meters to go, and Blank have heaps and heaps of time. They're not even ending the fight just yet, because Huwu is still here. He still wants to fight. Husk is reinforced as well, looking to close out with more kills. They had the Primal Reach out of D-Crown, but Trill's about to have his own, and Husk in the backline now with the Meteor Strikers looking for these healers. This is still not looking good for Machi. Unfortunately, they may just have finally started to stabilize. Cross my fingers.
Transcendence should seal the deal here because the respawn location for Machi is actually really good here. It's not so good for Blank. They're losing their DPSs. They're not going to be able to fight through the Transcendence at all. And for Machi, I mean, wow, this is where you want to hold it. This is so difficult now.
But that was extremely close. And honestly, it looked like Blank were about to be repelled when there was 5 meters. They then got that down to like 0.5 meters. And, well, they still have 2.5
I think the silver lining here for Machi is actually Blank used a lot of ultimates to try and keep that one in the game. Trill used the Primal Rage right at the end to try and keep that card going, but to no avail. Now Machi's turn to really hold on.
Yeah, Huss so aggressive with this play and Gunma with the Transcendence. Should be able to keep them pretty through this one. The sound barrier does not save D-Crown's life, and now they have their own. Blank did lose Eat You Up, but they've got more to commit now. No Talk needs to get a lot with that self-destruct, but all he's made is space. But space for whom? Kant goes wide on the Pulse Bomb. Huss is looking for something with this Meteor Strike, looking to swing a Wild Haymaker. Gets into the middle of the fight to create some chaos. Pops No Talk's mech. Where are the Machi members? 2.15 meters on the cart, and Blank looking to push it over the line, secure themselves their first win in Season 2 of OPC. The returning second place team has put a point on the board for themselves with the new lineup. That is the game they wanted.
Definitely a good start. Somewhat shaky start, but a good start because the result is a win. Get that big W on the scoreboard. Machi are going to have to take the loss there. And I got to say, it's still really well played by Machi. I still got to really commend Machi for the success that they did have, which was across the one Lijiang Golden Point that they won, and also a very tight series on both the original Lijiang and then also on the Temple of Anubis as well. And no surprise whatsoever, Huss is probably the one guy on the Blank side I really got to commend because he was the one really opening up fights for Blank in a lot of situations. Specifically, it was situations for Blank where they were behind, and yet Huss is still getting a number of kills, and Huss was still applying pressure, being a nuisance, and just really, you know, being a guy that's always a threat no matter what.
Yeah. Look, Huss has absolutely shone on this Doomfist. I think you're completely right. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be Erster level. That's not something we're going to know until they come up head to head. But I mean, for this guy's first performance on the OPC stage, you did actually bring up something interesting. He has played with this team before. That was quite a while ago. Yeah, but it is certainly relevant. But at any rate, yeah, look, that's a great first performance on the new hero that a lot of
Welcome back,
teams,
Huss.
Yeah, welcome, yeah.
To Blank.
Like, a lot of teams have kind of struggled to pick up the Doomfist. They're having decent performances on it, but they're not necessarily shining in the same way that some teams are. And I would say right now, Blank are one of the few teams that have a really good-looking Doomfist player. One that is going to be better than your Doomfist player if you haven't come prepared. And I think right now the only exception to that would be Ardiant, who maybe will go blow for blow with Huss right now, or indeed potentially be stronger.
Okay, let's take a look at a replay now onto the second point. This should be Machi's attack, actually, and they've really struggled here. They don't actually get this across the line until right at the end, but they do actually find a decent number of kills in the sort of middle area, but they still have this really long stretched out fight that just very difficult to get across the line. I think Hulu, you actually see the cart there. This is a big problem for Machi and a big strength for Blank is in a lot of these situations, part of the reason why Machi struggles so much to get the cart across the line is actually because the cart doesn't move, and Hulu's a big part of the Transcendence should be coming out any second now. There it is. Keeps Hulu alive for the time being. And actually, that lasted a long time for Blank before Machi even then caps out. So I believe it went into overtime before Machi actually got it there.
It did.
And it's not just on this map. We saw it on Kings Row as well, just stopping up the cut. Let's take a look at the next replay now as well. This is going to be Blank just before they finish the map.
Yeah, and I mean, actually, I think this is the one where Machi do hold out. If you
that's actually correct, yeah.
So the interesting thing about this is, at this point, that like they do get some good early picks, but they finally lose Eat You Up. They only really have Huss to go on.
That's the first time he died, by the way.
Exactly. They lose key tanks. They start losing a lot of key members, and the respawns favor Machi. There is just under 5 meters to go. And Blank should have probably retreated and reset, but we know what Blank are like. They're scrappy, they'll keep it going, and they get a lot of kills for it, and Machi can't ever relent for a moment here. The distance just kind of creeps closer and closer and closer till it gets to here, 0.51, and finally, Machi are able to get the full rack of respawns while Hulu is gone, and that is with No Talk not even having the mech. Even so, Blank make them fight for every single kill they do get on the Blank side. but they were actually able to hold down the fort. And I feel like there are teams that would have eventually crumbled to the pressure that was coming through from Blank, even just in making the mistake of stepping off that payload for that, extra crucial microsecond. So Machi, much like what we saw on Lijiang Tower when it was on Golden Point, they have started to rise to how Blank play. It still wasn't enough for them to overcome Blank in this situation, but I think we have to go back to this thing we were saying before, right from the very first game on Lijiang Tower, is actually this is already a stronger Machi in Season 1. And indeed, the talent pool, the skill gap between all of these teams is much, much closer than Season 1.
So player of the game, MVP on the Blank side goes to IEUP on the Tracer. And look, this is the guy collecting his dues because he got a lot of MVPs last season specifically for Tracer. Actually, if he was going to get an MVP today, I would have given it to him on the Widowmaker because he had a really good run on Dorado. Alternatively, but realistically, that was one map. But if I was going to look at all 4 maps played, I'd still have to pick Huss. And I know I've talked a lot about Huss so far, but I feel like his impact has been the most standout of all 6 members of Blank across the entire evening.
Yeah, and then look, that doesn't mean to say that Eat You Up wasn't having impact, because he certainly was. He always does. He is an incredibly strong Tracer. We say he, especially in Season 1, he absolutely contested Bacon Jack for the #1 Tracer spot, and I think for the most part was probably that little bit better. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough for them to win Season 1. But look, he's always
Can't get away with only one player being better.
Yeah, he's always going to be good on Tracer. He's always going to pull his weight. And even when he was going down to Kant, he was often getting other work done anyway. It was more than even as far as Eat You Up was concerned. But you're completely right. Compared to Eat You Up in this series, Huss felt like he was just more consistently coming up big for his team, whereas Eat You Up was mostly just hitting the beats of what a Tracer needs to do.
And by the way, that's a hard thing to do because Eat You Up was such a big player from last season. He was obviously the standout from Blank of Season 1. To actually be able to match that, take the limelight and the spotlight out of Eat You Up and really put it on yourself is not an easy thing to do. So I think, Huss, if this is your opening match, that was a pretty good showing, and I'm feeling a lot better about some of the new members going into this Blank lineup now, moving on to a quote-unquote harder competition, or rather harder competition based off standings from last season. Suddenly, you definitely do feel better. So if there were questions, and similar questions to what you would ask about Ardian, look, Ardian dropped the Dayfly and Thorncut. What are their new members like so far? Been pretty good. Ardian haven't dropped a single map, can't complain. Blank, they dropped 1 map, but they are still looking pretty good. So now let's go over to the post-match interview, and it'll be translated over by Serenity.
OK， 那我这边有几个问题要问他。他刚刚 Hello 的好简短，不自我介绍一下吗
？Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Daniel. My game name's Huru.
How old?
I'm 17 years old.
好年轻哦，16岁耶。好，因为他16岁，关系他第一次来到台湾，所以我想问他说，对于第一次跟台湾的选手对打吗
？Is this your first time playing against Taiwanese players?
No, this isn't my first time playing against Taiwanese players. I played in New Zealand against them. It's usually on a lot higher ping because we're from New Zealand, but yeah, they're very good players.
他是说，他以前从纽西兰的时候跟台湾队伍也练习过，所以不是第一次接触台湾的队伍。他私底下也有跟我说，他觉得台湾的选手都是普遍都比澳洲的厉害。
那所以今天对打，感觉台湾的选手如何
？So what do you think about Machi today?
Machi, very good team. They dive the backline a lot more than I'm used to from New Zealand. A lot of times they focus on the tanks. So yeah, I've had to matrix the backline a lot more than I used to.
那我想再问最后一个问题，就是对于
我先帮他翻译他。
OK， 不好意思，
没关系。他是说，他觉得 Machi 的刺客体系玩得非常成熟，然后他每次进场抓人的话，他都有很大的压力要去保后排。他是觉得说这次台湾的比赛非常精彩。
好，那我最后一个问题是要问说，对于他这一次的加入，他有没有信心帮队员拿到最后的胜利
？Since you're one of the newest additions to the team, do you have the confidence to carry us to victory?
Yes, I do, and yes, I have been doing, and I will continue to do.
他已经在做了，他也会继续做下去。
好，加油！那接下来还有专业的问题。
没有，就简单的问题。像阿吉，他是一个非常走刺客体系、非常侵略的一个队伍。那身为现在是副坦卫，其实刚跟 Blank 加入也不久。那他在保护上面有没有什么太大的困难，或是觉得有什么地方需要改进？因为我刚刚看他的表现是非常出色的，都保护得非常的漂亮。对。
As the new member of the team, playing against a team like Machi, who dived really deep with the Genji and Tracer, diving straight into our backline, there's a lot of pressure on you to protect our backline. And just from this match, you performed really well. What are your thoughts on Machi game in general?
I'm more familiar with Genji and Tracer, but when they bring out the Doomfist, like it tends to be the Matrix, just Doomfist, just right-clicking somebody into a wall. So they're a very good team. Yeah.
他以前练习的时候都还是没有什么机会接触到就是对方有那个毁灭拳王的情形，所以这次如果那个 M7 选的是比较标准的阵型，比如说长短枪或者是带原式的刺客阵，他还
比较适应。
对，比较适应。但是每次就是毁灭拳王出来，他想造，结果毁灭拳王就直接一个右键，完全没办法。
拳王好像保不太住了。对。另外一个比较生活化问题啦，就是他单身吗
？Are you single?
Yes.
OK，
是的。
那如果他觉得，那有个问题想问他，就是如果他有女朋友，你觉得他自己觉得他还有时间可以打17个账号吗
？Because basically told everyone here really about how you have a lot of smurfs and you were part of the effort to bring New Zealand up for the World Cup, and he was just asking if you had a girlfriend, would you have had the time to do that?
Only if she plays Mercy and pockets me.
除非那个他的女朋友是玩慈悲，然后只会照他而已。
哦，是，那你告诉他就是维持单身比较好。对，过来人的建议。
Just stay single.
Yeah. 好，就我拿了。
好，那这次呢，恭喜 Blank 呢获得这一次的胜利。那下一场呢，由 MT 对上 Blank， 休息一下，马上回来。
There you go. Who from Blank? I guess one of the new additions to him, a little bit unsung as a bit of a hero as well. I think Asen, who's one of the Taiwanese casters there, who by the way also went to the World Cup. So not the first time these two have been in the same room together. Kind of pointed out that he did a great job of protecting the backline. I'm not too sure Sereni pointed out that part out, but. Certainly, there were moments where Gumbo and RQ2 were getting picked out a lot.
Yeah.
That was happening with the Doomfist as well. When the Tracer Genji came out a lot, you did notice suddenly the supports weren't dying as much. On the other hand, suddenly Nuns was killing the DPS a lot more, so something definitely swapped up there. A little bit of a change-up.
Yeah, and as much as we were complimenting Huss before, and you mentioned this as well, I mean, Huwu equally so. Really pulling his weight. You mentioned a lot about how he was just keeping the card alive for the team, and we also noted some of those great defense matrices that came out of it, or matrices, in fact, that came out of Huwu on that Diva. So questions about Blank's new members totally answered here, but they are not done for the night just yet.
Yeah, I think there are more questions. Some questions answered, more questions still yet to be answered, because the next match is going to be Blank versus Mega Thunder from Thailand, as well as some members from the USA and Sweden as well, so a mixed bag, and maybe one surprise that you might not be expecting from Mega Thunder either. If you want to know what that is, you're going to have to find out right after this break.